these people turn up week after week and you get to know these human beings. And then I'm sure it's really awkward for some of us or some of you that come in and you don't know anyone and it feels a bit weird. But honestly, these people turn up week after week, some of them, and it's so cool because you kind of all get to know each other and I really like it. It's a really lovely way of doing things. Hi, G87. Hi, Titsub. Hi, Kinky Smiley Kitty. Tempest, yawn morning. Is it really bloody early for you? It is, isn't it? That's a complete difference, isn't it? It's a huge one. Hello, everyone. Nice to see anyone who is into kink, who is LGBTQI, whoever you are. And if you're a therapist, if you're looking to get a CPD certificate, everyone is welcome. And it's mainly perverts here. So come along and welcome to us perverts. Hi, Nikki. Oh, 6 a.m. Fuck, yeah, it is early. Jesus, that's a bit dedicated. Thank you. That's very nice of you. Hi, Nikki. Hi, is it Remio or Remio? I hope it's Remio, if I got that right. And hi, Lady Vader. Or would you prefer to be called Eris? Nice to see you all. So can I remind people, as people are coming in, hi, Pagan Princess. Finally caught one of these. Yay, welcome. Eris, please. Hi, Eris. Thank you. Glad you changed that so I'll remember that more easily. Hi, Grey Leia. Nice to see you. Welcome all. Let me talk about a few rules of the room before we start. This isn't therapy. If you are triggered or something happens to you, whatever that word means to you, please make sure that you are okay and you can look after yourself. That's really important. We often talk about quite contentious things in here. Things can talk about violence, can talk about sex, can talk about all sorts of different things. So please make sure you can look after yourself. That's really important. If it was a live workshop, I would say something quite different, but it isn't. Hello, Mr. P. Nice to see you. So, and also, it's really important. Please don't comment on anybody's looks. Right, we're not here to pick up, we're here to talk. Please don't have a look at anyone and say, oh my God, you look really nice, you look lovely. I'll pick on someone I know. Oh, opal fruit, I really love that colour on you. Oh my God, like, do you fancy a drink sometime? Not what this is about, okay? It's really important. And I've picked on him because I know him. I'm really open, that's okay. Oh God, you know what I mean? So please have some consideration for other people in the room. Hello, Domina. So it's hello, darling Death. I really like that. What an awesome name. Roy, you feel you should apply for certificate soon? I'm sure you could use it for something in some way, shape or form. And if you have anything to type, please write it down the side. I will read it out. I do my best. If I miss it, nudge me. Please nudge me. Because I am sorting around what we've got at the moment. We've got 56 people in at the moment. That often goes up to 70 or 80 during the evening. Can go to more. So I'm doing both jobs at once. Hello, Kitten Wiggles. Right, we've got 3 subjects today. And the 3 different subjects that we've got are very much based on the BDSM scene at first. So that is, what are the scene's expectations of women? I'll come to that one in a minute. Then we're going to be talking about what is a scene and the scene. So this is really handy for people who aren't into kink, who are new, who are therapists maybe, and who are like, don't know. And for those of us who do know. So we'll talk about that. What is a scene? And I'm going to talk a little bit about setting up a scene and how to make a scene as well as part of it. And we'll be talking about contracts as well. And then for the last third of the evening, we're going to be talking about polyamory, a glossary to polyamory, which you can look up. What I've done is made sure I've got one so I don't forget any words, and then I'll be expanding what the people write on it about experience, and I would ask you to join in as well. And if anything is left, the problem is with a polyamory glossary is you might as well be reading a dictionary. Like, they can take so long and there is so much to go through. Did you all just see my dogs run past? Sorry. The other big dog is barking outside. I have dogs. I do warn people. And if they bark, I'm really sorry. I thank fuck you're not paying, put it that way. CC, evening all. So we're going to talk about those 3 different things today. So polyamory glossary is at the end. We're talking about scenes and contracts in the middle. And we're going to talk about puppies. I know. They're very cute, aren't they? I really like them. And at the beginning, what we're going to be talking about is women on the scene, expectations of women. That came from expectations of men on the scene from last week. And again, this is what you have asked for, not me coming up with ideas. And next week's is already full of subjects. I might already have 1 subject for the week after. So looking for 2 more for that week as well, as we start to talk through. That's crazy, isn't it? So, and of course, I've got Lamb live on Sunday. So some of you may or may not be coming. And that's a live workshop that I do on the scene. There you go. We'll talk about that in a minute. On the scene for scenesters, kinksters, perverts, LG, all of us, anyone who wants to come along. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Deb. I am a therapist. What does that mean? So I've been kinky since I was 17. That's nearly 40 years. I'm 56. I'm 57 in June. And I've been poly and queer for most of that time, nearly all of that time. Poly comes into that for nearly all the time. The queer and the kinky has definitely been there since the beginning and all the way through. Jerry says, it won't be live on Sunday, but we'll record it and post it on YouTube and Facebook a couple of days later. Thank you, Jerry. That's really sweet of you and very kind. So you can always catch up with these. They're on YouTube as well if you follow London Alternative Market. Identify as she. Look, what does that mean? Identification pronouns are very trendy. They're very here. They're very important. However, I don't think we should always ask someone for their pronouns because that puts them in a position of having to answer. And what if they're not ready and what if they don't know? So that's not something I will put on people to do. I have been, as I say, actively kinky for nearly 40 years now, a long time, and I've done those pride marches at the beginning. I would say I'm demisexual. However, I would say that I'm heteroromantic. I tend to have long-term relationships with men. That's me. So you know who I am. I'm a therapist with, God, I don't know, 40 to 50,000 hours of experience and about 600 or 700 600 and something hours of personal therapy as well. And I'm also a supervisor, but I gave up supervising. It just wasn't like that when I had cancer because my clients didn't want to leave. They were very sweet and very kind. So I had cancer 3 years ago. Some of the people here play bingo with me when I mention things like cancer or pre-morteming or certain words. They go bingo, and they're bastards. We don't like them. We just ignore those people. M. Baroness, you'll be there. I can't wait. Please come up and say hello. I would love to meet you, see you. Please do that. So let's talk about the expectations of women on the scene. The reason I mention my gender is it's very difficult when people segment people into things of gender when they say women, men. However, there is a difference. And it does make a difference, doesn't it? So anyone here who identifies as a woman, cis-born, otherwise, who is a woman, whoever you are, what are your experiences for being on the scene and what do you think your expectations are? I wanted to start with personally, I think the expectations of me as a woman going on to the BDSM market, to marketplaces, to shops, to being online, to places like FetLife, to parties, they have varied with my age and my size. And both of those things have come into it. The expectations are different. Some people expect people to be completely sexual, to be completely giving. Some people expect a conversation. Many people do not. Many people expect you not to have boundaries. Fellow she-her here. Hello, bum, bum, butt. So it's interesting, isn't it, that there's a pressure on women on the scene to give, to be sexual, to expect. There's a lot of that. Now, there's been a massive move in the last, I'd say from the late 80s to around consent. When I first joined, because it was a bit like that, when I first came upon the scene, if you weren't sucking someone's cock to get into a party, you didn't get into the party. And people might say, oh, no, it can't have been like that. It was like you've got to, I don't know if anyone here has been around for a really long time and remembered what that was like, or if anyone had that experience as well. I would like to say that doesn't go on anymore, and I would be lying. There are situations. It's very interesting when I look at the popularity online on places like Instagram or FetLife or Snapchat or any of those. The idea is that the woman that we see is there to provide some kind of sexual imagery or service a lot of the time. And there's a real fight against that nowadays, and consent has come into it. And in fact, consent can almost go too far sometimes as well, which is a very contentious thing to say. It can get in the way for some people who are into consensual non-consent, who, profess to be very fantastic at consent. There's a lot of violators on the scene and around. Okay, so let's have a look at that. So Nemoria says, let's start with Jerry. Sorry, let's go up a little bit. So Jerry says, I have to say it depends on the scene that you're part of. Those expectations don't apply very often in the events that I attend or run, I hope. I would hope so too. I would hope so that when I go to LAM that people wouldn't expect me to do things. I remember being on stage once, nothing to do with kink, and I was playing Calamity Jane, and I was stripping on stage. There's a point where she strips, and they did ask me, how come you've got some corsets we can choose from? Well, I said, I happen to have a load. I was very out, I made a joke, but so it was down to a corset and some bloomers. And I'm not kidding, even in a musical, semi-professional musical, someone said, and the rest. Like, it was like, fucking hell, that's quite interesting, isn't it? That expectation. Whereas if somebody else was getting their clothes off, like Wild Bill Hickok or somebody, that response isn't quite the same, unless you're in a certain situation, like a strip club or something else. There are different expectations, especially when you've got crowds. Nemoria says it really was, and not just sucking cock. No, sex was definitely expected, and it was often penetrative, and it was play. You watch people dripping off people's arms depending on who they were and how it was, and that was much more expected of women. People who identified as male, men, then that was very different. It was different for them. There was a hierarchy. And if you look at the gay scene originally, when I started, there was also a hierarchy there. Or if you started as a submissive, you worked your way up. You couldn't just come in as a dominant. It was pretty different back then. So there were different expectations. Tits Up says, I'm AFAB non-binary, use they, them, but as a cunt and tits owner within the kink scene, it feels a slightly odd place I inhabit at events. I bet. I wonder what that's like for you and how challenging that must be. Because people, I mean, how often do people talk to your tits or talk to, I don't see you as a human being? And that can definitely happen on the scene. That is there. Oh, are you playing tonight? What are you doing? And actually, I'm also going to say that I find women some of the guiltiest people of this at events. How contentious is that? Often it isn't men. It is often women who are going up and grabbing other women, grabbing boobs, touching and doing stuff. And that's quite interesting, because a lot of us are also saying, no, hang on, what about consent? I was talking to a friend last night who I haven't seen in quite a few years, and he turned around and he said that the consent issues he has at parties, he's a Killing Kittens fan. For those of you who don't know what Killing Kittens is, it's a swinging club. They don't actually kill kittens. So that's a swinging place, and lots of clubs, and it's cool, and they do education and all sorts of things as well. It seems it's more for a certain type of look or age, for sure. And he goes along with his girlfriend, and she finds real difficulty. She is touched and grabbed by other women more than men. So I think it's interesting that the expectations of women on the scene are also quite interesting. Darling Death says, really like that still. I'm non-binary AFAB as well. I find a lot of female expectations still apply. And men still view me as a female, objectify me as a person with boobs. Yeah, and I agree. So we were talking about men last week, and it is still happening. So I'm really glad you're sharing some of these stories. Also non-binary AFAB, solidarity, like that cute sin as well. Tina says, I run into a lot of women that believe that there are expectations from the community, but their expectation is not really there. Either they got that information from one person, or it is their imagination. The sad part is they use that perceived expectation to allow their boundaries to be weak. And do you know what, Tina? I'm going to agree with you. I think sometimes we are screaming that things aren't fair and aren't okay, because we've been so used to screaming for hundreds of years that we are still screaming, and sometimes that isn't always the case. And that some events are incredibly inclusive, incredibly well run and impactful, and have a lot of consent. That said, I remember going to a venue, oh God, I don't know, about 4 or 5 years ago, and I did a talk on consent before the play party started, and within 15 minutes there was a consent violation by somebody who'd actually been in the talk. And that's quite interesting, isn't it? Like, what don't you understand about that? Tits Up, I only go to events where I know enough people have scenes arranged. I started on the scene as a woman. Yeah, so it's how we're perceived, it's how we're seen as well. And I don't know what your experience is as well. If people know who you are, or you're known, you can turn up at venues and parties, especially if you have a certain look. And that's often somebody who's a size 8 to 10, and they'll say, could you get the play started? Could you do this, please? Could you do that, please? And as I say, I find the different expectations of me as my weight's gone from here to here and back here again and here again, that the expectations of me are different. I don't know if any of you have found the same, or what you think as well. Please do write down the side and let me know. I think there are massive differences between the swinging scene and between the BDSM scene. There is a different form of consent or non-consent. There are different expectations. Raven Black. Oh, so it's less of an issue if I go to an event as a top, as I wear more. Yes, so it's interesting, isn't it? So is it wearing less that invites something? I'm not saying it should or shouldn't. That's not a moral judgment. That is what are other people thinking about you and of you in that moment? Raven Black went to a swinging fetish event with my sub and got a swinger slide up against me mid-scene. Carrie says, the swinger scene has such different etiquette. Jerry says, swingers and kinksters are rarely a good mix, to each their own. And Nemorius, the swinger etiquette seems very different to kink etiquette. Yes, so for me, the swinging scene depends on the sort of party you're going to. Some Black Killing Kittens parties are a little more kinky, and there is much more an idea of consent there. But those that are swinging also really advocate consent. And there are some swinging parties that turn around and say, I assume that everyone's saying yes until they tell me a no. So it's a very different expectation, isn't it, as to how that works and how we think. So if you were going to a party and you were new to all of this, what would your expectations be as a woman, or as of yourself, or as a man, or anybody, AFAB, non-binary, turning around and thinking that women should or shouldn't do? Should women get drunk? Are they responsible for themselves? Should women take drugs when they're there? Should they be aware of what's happening to them? Should they only play to certain levels? We have issues when people get into subspace, so subspace is when somebody has a really high mixture of chemicals that they have their body responding. It's really their fight, flight, freeze there. So you've got your sympathetic nervous system reacting, and we get that with pain as well, and that can really happen, and people go into a euphoric state where they can't consent. A lot of people are taken advantage of at that time, and there are other times where people stay well away and people are really well looked after. People seem to interfere in scenes. Have you noticed a difference around the attention? I often talk about this because I am a fat old woman, which is a true and good descriptor. It's not an insulting descriptor. It's, that the attention on me is a hell of a lot less than it used to be. However, when I walk into an event as the kink shrink, if I'm known, the attention is really different again. But the attention then becomes, oh, Deb, can you tell us something? I've got this problem, or could you cover this today, or what about this? It isn't sexual. It isn't an interest in me as a human being, and my sexuality is different. No one in kink should be drunk or drugged if they are playing. Well, that's interesting, Nemoria, because actually one of my oldest fantasies is to be drugged. But I'm never going to do it. I don't want to do it. One of my oldest fantasies is to be drugged out of my head and then have some terrible things happen to me and have it played back to me in a film later. I'm never going to do it. The risk is too high. I've done some pretty crazy things in my time. But that's consensual, isn't it? And that would be private. Should I? Shouldn't I? That's quite interesting, isn't it? But I do agree, on average, don't drink and kink, don't drug and kink. I really agree with those things. That said, people also like to take drugs. I'm writing a piece again because I lost it on masturbation at the moment, on masturbation, and part of what I'm looking at is the impact of drugs on masturbation and our capacity to orgasms. So I'm talking about not just about psychopharmaceuticals, not just about the drugs that are given to people for blood pressure and different things, but also the sort of normal medication that we even take, like an antihistamine, can actually affect vaginal dryness, vaginal lubrication. Who knew? And so I'm like looking, Domina's like, really? Yeah, it's quite an interesting lot of research on it. So yeah, I'm writing about that again because I lost the writing at the moment. So drugs, like, do we mean drugs or do we mean drugs? What sort of drugs do we mean? And what if one drink helps somebody just take the edge off? If we're feeling really nervous and we're anxious. Bun Bun Butt says, only being on the scene for 2 months, I found that there is almost an expectation for women to either be dominant or only be submissive. That's interesting. So you found that women almost aren't expected to be switches. So that person in the middle that goes for one or the other. I find that there's for men, when they switch, I find there's an interesting, less of an extremity, whereas women, there seems to be more of an extreme where we have to take on a very dominant role to show that we're dominant versus a very submissive role to show that we're submissive. And there are still people out there very much who say that they're from the old guard. I'm sorry, I don't believe that because that's not how I experienced all of the old guard, where, you just do this, you shut up and you must take, and you must be a good girl and you must do. There are still people that are out there that really think that. Stanley sent a smile. Was that me talking about drugs? Ginger. Not been to an event yet, but my plan is to not drink, go with a group of friends I trust and not play, and also have some friends who also won't be playing, so I know I won't be alone at any time. I'd really agree with that. If you're going to do drugs and you're going to take a trip, if you look at the really interesting research into psychedelics, psilocybin, around therapy and therapeutic process. There's a lot of arguments for taking some drugs. There's next to no research on microdosing it, but that's starting to happen. I'm curious. I'm not a drug and drink and kink person. Someone said the other day, you seem to really disagree with that. I do. I think we have to be sober and aware, really aware for our own safety. And you need a guide if you're going to do that sort of thing. You need someone with you. And I would say at kink events, unless you're really confident and you feel strongly that those things won't happen, but that can get us into trouble too. If the expectations of a woman are you should put up and shut up and be a good girl, then the person you're dealing with, regardless of their gender, isn't going to be particularly pleasant anyway. So I think that's a great idea, Ginger. I would really advocate that. Nemoria, a friend does want to do a scene on Rohypnol. Yeah, I could be that friend. That I would be really, but what I'm really worried about is that if I do that, what if that person really does go a bit too far or certain things happen, even if it is being filmed, who then has access to that film? What about the flashbacks afterwards? What about the drug use implications, the way Rohypnol hits people afterwards? This is my problem with consent. I don't think you can consent with full knowledge because you don't know the answer to those questions. The same as when you play. So I'm not saying we shouldn't negotiate, coming to that one later, and we shouldn't. I'm asking, can you ever truly consent because you never know all the consequences? It's an interesting question. Scandi Al said, sorry, going back to clothing, my kink is CNC and I like normal clothes ripped off me. I like that too. That's kinky clothing to me. I find it annoying when events specify, oh my God, we should go out together. Trust me on this one. Specify fetish wear rather than being straight, saying that by that they mean sexy lingerie, corsets, leather or chains for women. Absolutely. I used to love going to a club called Sweet Torments because I could just turn up in me clothes like this dress. Everyone's happy. And do you know what? That's interesting because I've done a few talks in some clubs over the years that only allow you in if you dress up. And I've turned around and said, I'll do the talk when I ain't dressing up. And then I'm allowed in and I stay for ages. And I have a really good time and I really like them. I don't play in public, especially because of my work. So I don't actively play. So I do think that if someone sees the inside of my Mersey tunnel vaginal canal, they are not going to have the same opinion of me or have a different interest. So I think there's a limitation as to what I can do in public sometimes. That's a contentious one, and that's one I talk to my supervisor quite a lot about. So, but there is an expectation for women to really undress and be part of that, whereas men can get away with suits. I love a suit on a man. A kilt, something slightly alternative or all black, whereas women are definitely supposed to wear less. Tina says, I should myself enough. I don't need other people to should me too. G87 says, I've never been to a full-on kinky event as the ones being discussed. How do people feel safe, especially when in such a vulnerable state? Is it personal responsibility, group responsibility? The answer is both. There's, if you look at the gay scene over the years, there used to be something, or still is, called the minority stress perspective of how stress is related to us and how stress impacts us. And actually the fact that we're a group and the fact that we come together, the fact that we see each other as a family reduces stress and increases safety, sometimes perceived safety and sometimes actual safety. And that's an interesting piece of research for around the gay scene that we could absolutely apply to the kink scene. There is an etiquette whereby you can go up to a dungeon monitor and say, so a often dungeon monitor will have an armband on or something around their neck to say that that's who they are, to say, please keep an eye out for me. I'm really new. If I look uncomfortable, please come over and check with me. There is an etiquette in clubs that says you may not go over to somebody and interfere in a scene. I'm really contentious. I will go up to a dungeon monitor and say, I used to have a friend who would disappear and into her own head. And at parties, sometimes I would watch someone playing and I would watch her quite often because I was really frightened for her because I knew where she went. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, maybe in those days, people would go much further than she'd said because I know what she said, and I would go over and stop the scene, especially at a party. So I think it's really good to have someone looking out for you and to have a group looking out for you. So I think it's really important. And I think it's good to go up and say to someone, so like at LAM, we have a newbies talk before anybody even comes along. So you can go along, you can have a conversation, and then later on you can let the dungeon monitor know that you're new, that you want to try things. And then of course you can ask the dungeon monitor to play with you. So you can try things out, and they They have a different awareness and responsibility, and the way that they play with people is different to how others will play with people. And because we've all got a selfishness in us, we will want something out of it, don't we, in some way, shape or form. We're not doing it. I don't do these talks purely because I'm this wonderful person who wants to give. They fucking stroke my ego. It gets my name known and it gets me work. Let's be serious. That's the darker side. And at the same time, I really love giving back, and I love getting to know people, and I love learning, and I love learning people's opinions. There is still a selfish side there as well. So Ginny says, I'm new to this. I've only been to 2 months. I expect someone to ask me before touching me, but I'm hypersensitive, so my reactions can be different. Yes, I agree with you, Ginny. So do you know what? One thing we started to do at London Alternative Market is you can buy wristbands or badges. And the badges state, ask before touching, come in and touch for a cuddle, or absolutely touch me. And it's very important that we can communicate those things. So I can't remember what the colours are. They're green, red, and another colour. Jerry, you might know what the other colour is. So, it's really important to really state that. So I think you can also wear something that says back off, no touching, and just to remind people as well, and just to say, please don't. It's okay to hold a boundary. It's really important to hold a boundary. We talk about boundaries all the time. Again, that's another writing in the making, not about boundaries. We talk about them all the time. We know what they are, but we don't teach people how to hold them, how to look at it, how to find their voice. And I think that's important. Stan, you agreed with my drugs. Right. Domina says, one of my slaves wants to do a scene where she's drugged in some way. I might do that with her someday, but if I did it, I would make it entirely responsible for her. You would be entirely responsible for her well-being while in that state. Far more so than the responsibility I take on the day-to-day as her master. So it's no small deal. It's also a really big deal for a lot longer. So when somebody's going to have a come down, we don't know how long the drug state's going to last. You have to research about their body size, their shape, what that means, their weight according to the drug that you're going to. You've got to be really careful and really do your research on that one, and be really there for them afterwards, because it isn't just the scene we're talking about. There is it. It's the impact after the scene. Darling Death says, I've definitely seen that women are expected to show a much higher level of dominance. Yes, that's what I was saying earlier. So yeah, men are dominant, women are submissive beliefs. I mean, how many women here, and non-binary, even that were, oh God, I'm sorry if I get this etiquette wrong. So let's say you are cis-born and you are non-binary, and yet because you still have a cunt and tits, how many times are you told you just haven't met the right dominant yet? Anyone? That happens a lot, especially if you're a dominant woman. A trip advisor, that was too early, a character, that's clever. It's seemingly impossible to find a dom as a female AFAB sub. I'm really sorry to hear that, tit sub. I know a lot. I think it's really hard to find a female dominant, a dome. I think it's hard to find anyway, right? I think it's pretty difficult because a lot of people out there are financially based as dominant women, and then you've got a smaller group of people who are female dominants. So you are in an even tinier pond looking for something, and it is a hell of a lot harder, the same as it's really hard when you get older and things. There is a truth in that, and I'd like to make that better for you and say that that's wrong. However, it is also a fact. So I agree with that. A trip advisor. And that was about me talking about drugs. I do enjoy getting drunk and doing drugs, but I don't think I do it at this early stage of my kink experience. If you are going to do it, Sammy, do it with someone you really fucking trust. However, what I would also say is if you are in an altered state of being, your consent might not be the same. Your reactions won't be the same. Some things can trigger us in some ways, especially if we've got some form of drug inside our body or some form of drink. I mean, drinking is ethanol, it's still a drug. So that can happen as well. So we have to be really aware sometimes that we might be more emotional, we might be more closed, and the experience won't necessarily be the same, no matter how much we enjoy getting drunk or drugged, to then go into a different state when playing. I personally will not let a top anywhere near me if they're pissed or on anything. Absolutely fucking not. I'm sorry, but if I'm tied up and I'm in a situation where I can get out or anything, go fuck yourself. I'm not interested. Darling Death, with dress codes, I've definitely noticed a difference too. Women being held to a high standard and expectations to follow those dress codes. I really hope that's changing. However, in my experience, it isn't changing fast enough. Scandi says, not even expecting women to either be submissive or dominant. I look very vanilla approaching middle age. I'm past middle age, I think. I have had kinky inclinations my whole life. It's just how I am. When I recently came out to the local scene and started going to lunches with my husband, several people assumed he's the one who wants this in his life and just convince me to tag along. And of course, I'm not like that, really. Very annoying. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? So that's an interesting expectation of the woman isn't really the one who wants it. There's this interesting fear around bi women who are bi-curious. I don't know if anyone's experienced this, but over the years, I certainly have. And I think we can be very scared to say, oh, this person doesn't really know what they're doing or hasn't tried this yet, therefore I'm scared to give them a chance. And if no one gives anyone a chance, where do we go with that? Like, we all start somewhere. But there is this interesting falsehood that can happen of the man drags the woman along and she's not really the one who's interested in it. Stanley, please don't do it at any stage. I drink, but drunk is definitely a no if you're playing. Yeah. I don't know what you're apologising for, Nemoria. Maybe I missed that. Sorry. Cue to sin. I really like a lack of dress codes because as a femme presenting non-binary person, I'm not always feeling anything that comes under women's standard dress codes. I really agree with you, cue to sin. You know, there are sometimes so many issues when you've got somebody who is maybe femme presenting, but then wears something that's this, that then is this, and then is that. And then it's like, well, where do you fit in? Where do you want to be? And it's like, I don't really want that imposed. And I think that's something that more clubs and spaces should maybe take an interest in, the more we're moving away from binary. Cinders, I've noticed that several local venues accept female guests for free as long as they follow a dress code. A lot of venues will take women for free if they're single, maybe of a certain age and size, without a doubt, because let's face it, that's what brings everybody else in. And there is a truth in that. However, so especially for couples who are looking for a unicorn, that extra person that they want to join them, or for a poly group potentially. So that definitely happens as well. It's worth thinking about that. Do you want to go there or not? There's an event you can go to on FetLife that clearly states, I will only attend venues that have equal pay for equal people. I think that's the whole point of equality, isn't it? It's the same. It just screams to me that they want to bump up the numbers and venues through the sales of drinks. Yeah, I agree. But I think coloured dress codes can be okay as they're flexible, but still facilitates an atmosphere at events, which I can understand. But when gendered, it leaves NBs out of the conversation completely. Yes, and I was saying earlier, it's interesting that even this conversation leaves non-binary out it really does, because the first one was, again, I was talking to my supervisor about this. It's interesting, it's a request, men on the scene and women on the scene. And what about everybody else? What about that? You know, there are more groups out there that don't fall into one of those two categories, but it's the place we fall into. Some places don't recognise the 1950s housewear dress as suitable wear. Almost they just want women as little as possible, just a thought. I agree, CC. So you have some clubs who will just look at you as soon as you come in and go out, out, out. No, not interested. Jerry, why did you say orange? What was that about? I missed that. Oh, God, I'm 36 messages. I need to go fast. I should buy a jacket with lots of spiky things on it. Yeah, or a vest with, I don't know, half nipple showing.
Lamb-coloured wristbands.
Oh, thank you, the orange. Thank you very much. So that's the agreement. So I think they're a really good idea if we can get that sort of thing going on the scene in clubs and different places. It means about that. I've heard of, okay, your expression, I agree. A sub wearing a collar is usually left alone. A dom considered fair game. That's interesting about women as well. I found no matter if I'm wearing a collar or not, I can still, in fact, more with female doms than men. This is interesting. I said it last week. I was at a party many years ago and I was standing next to a dominatrix and she turned around and said, get me a drink. And I said, sorry. And she said, get me a drink. And she was really, and I said, oh, wrong person. This is even 15 years ago. Wrong person. And I went, get your own fucking drink. And she said, don't talk to me like that. And she looked at the guy I was with and went, are you going to let her talk to me like that? And he went, he just put his hands up because he knew me well as well. And I just said, I don't have any right to talk to me like that. Who the fuck do you think you are? And it's that thing of like, don't you know who I am? No, I don't. And I don't care. So that's difficult as well. That so often women can expect that. But yes, a collar really is a signal of. However, is it nowadays? A collar is a fashion accessory. It means many things. What sort of collar? How is it worn? Is it put there by somebody else? What does it mean? Told that too many times, having not finding right dom. Right, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Darling Death, it's almost a daily occurrence that dominants tell me that I'm just confused and need a dom to remind me of my place as a woman. Yes, that's handy, isn't it? I've yet to meet one of those. Can't stand that you just haven't met the right dominant yet. And then Gallant teased me that I let someone mark me for the first time last night, slippery slope. Depends. I think you can be dominant and kinky, and I think you can be dominant and into pain. I don't think it changes who you are. I think it's what you want that matters. Cutestin, totally agree. Most everyone assumes that I'm sub and I'm not. The amount of doms who have done the, oh, you are really a thing is really ridiculous. Yes, it's very offensive. Bun butt, Cinders, completely agree. Dress codes asking for females to wear less have murky intentions in my eyes. And yeah, and also to charge and to let them in for free, that's another issue. Tina, I once went to a class where the sub was given a drug. It was about the sub really having to trust the dom on a new level. It turned out that the dom just gave her a baby aspirin. I hope he had a fucking good medical write-up and really understood what that person. Aspirin can be really dangerous to some people, and aspirin also, if you're going to do a scene and you give someone aspirin, they're way more likely to mark or bruise, and they're more likely to come up or bleed. Please don't ever give an aspirin as something. Like, if I was there, I'd have gone fucking mad. That is very dangerous. Give them a placebo, yes. Like, I don't know, something very natural can also be really dangerous, but even an aspirin, I'm already on blood thinners. If you gave me an aspirin, that's not good. And if you're then going to hit me, fuck me, the marking and stuff is going to come up. Oh, I find that really unethical. I'm really sorry. However, she did not know that until the end of the scene. The bottom believed that, yes, placebo is incredible. So, of course, we can play with placebos and have that sort of thing happen. Jerry, Ivory, I'll happily hold your hand and lead you further down that slope. P.S. We are real-life friends, so it's not an inappropriate personal comment. Okay. Dom, I'm blessed. Is clothed dom naked sub a thing, or is it always? No, yes, it is. So it's not always CMNF. It does go the other way. So CMNF means clothed male, naked female. We do also have clothed female, naked males. However, they're not as big a part as they're not. So but I would argue that a load of male subs definitely want to have a really good time. We're going to do that for sure. Scanny says, fair enough, just haven't seen those events. I promise you they're there. I've been using dom and sub in top or bottom instead of he, she, so that I'm not addressing gender. I like that, Tina. That's helpful. So CFM, so I hopefully that's been carried now. So clothed female, naked male, or you can also say it's clothed male, naked female. But of course, where's the non-binary in that? Again, you see, everything is around a binary system. What about everybody else? So people are really nicely answering. Okay, so anything else about expectations of women, or can we go on to scenes and setting up scenes and what the scene is and everything else as well? So anything else, got anything they want to say or want to ask about expectations of women? The one thing I would say is women really look after women on the scene. We talk. So if there is often a situation whereby somebody is causing issues, we talk about you. I'm not saying you. We talk about them. Like, there's nowhere we can go that says, hey, we really need to put this person's name down. And we really need to do, this person is dangerous. You can't write that anywhere. There's nowhere that allows you to do that. However, I would also argue that women really look after women as much as they can, and we talk. So when somebody is abusive or not particularly kind or aggressive or expectational, we talk. And we talk a lot. So I think women can also be incredibly helpful to each other on the scene and mentor each other in their own way as well. And that makes a huge difference. So I think women can be rather awesome too, as far as that's concerned. So again, that goes back to that idea as well when we talk about minority stress perspective, that the research on it, that we're sometimes talking about how when we look after each other, like at LAM, we have chats that are called Lamely, and people take the piss. It's like, oh, it's family. But I do cheerleading, not personally. Jesus, that would be a horrific mess. But I'm very involved in cheerleading through one of my daughter's teams. They've got about 20 teams in their gym. Like, I'm there on Saturday, and then I'm at LAM on Sunday. But I could have gone there, but I'm going to go and try and get back to watch one of her teams. And actually, we talk about cheer family. So when people are in a group, they tend to look after each other. Yes, I understand that, Nemoria. So Not for Softage. So Not for Softage is somebody on FetLife. I've joined that. They are maintaining a problem persons list. However, the problem with a problem persons list is its perspective. And sometimes things are clusterfucks, and sometimes things aren't about consent, they're about mistakes. So I think that's quite an interesting one. How many times does someone have to make a mistake before they're actually a predator or a danger? What does that look like, and what does that mean? And all genders can be predatory and certainly a problem. and on the scene as well. I just love the way sometimes that women look after each other and care for each other. And I think that's rather magical as well. And that happens on the scene, without a doubt. So the scene is a great place. So what do we mean by the scene? So there are two aspects to the word scene. Lena says, I prefer to talk to a woman at munches and events if I can, not only more comfortable in many ways, but to support each other. Yeah, get to know a few people. Women also provide references for each other. They do. And we can ask each other about somebody, you know, other women as well. We can just ask. G87 sounds like manipulation is another big issue. I think people are very guilty of manipulating themselves on the scene. You know, you read about what a sub does or what a top does or a bottom. It doesn't matter what the title is. And you think that there's a big should. So, you know, we tend to fall into that thing of this is what I should be doing. And then, of course, somebody else can play on that. If you were a decent sub, if you were a good top, if you were a proper dominant, if you were a real submissive, it's the same as if you loved me. It's where that slight gaslighting element comes in. Gaslighting is a very overused term. We're not trying to make someone feel insane here, but we're trying to make them doubt their word, which isn't quite the same. That's more manipulation. So we have to be very careful. Jerry, women are generally pretty awesome. I have far more female friends than male, including me. Tempest 68 says there's also the honesty factor. Revenge and manipulation, false reports are sadly a thing for both genders. I would agree. So on average, when you look at police reports and law, around 7% of claims are unfounded, 7%. I'm going to put myself right out there and say that that figure is more in double figures on the scene than actually when it comes to rape and law. I have been involved so many times in these sort of situations where I've seen texts and seen things happen and then it's twisted. And then I had a client many years ago who had a scene with somebody. I'm going to talk about what a scene is. They'd set it up. They'd spoken about it. They were both very happy with it. And she said, I want to be caned until I bleed. I want my arse to have stripes on it and I want blood to run down. Now, look, no BDSM that leaves a trifling or transient mark, please be aware of this if you don't know it, is legal. We are practicing an illegal thing here. So when we go to a therapist, we also have to think about that. Now, I would hope that most therapists will not say, you're breaking the law, I'm going to the police about you. I don't think they get very far anyway. However, I remember teaching a group of supervisors and giving them a certain scenario, and 6 out of the 7 said with this one, they would go to the police, whereas I said I would work with this person, and it's way more effective. So, but the problem with BDSM is, leaving more than a trifling transient mark is illegal. So if we create a bruise or a mark, we have just broken the law. But so is every fucking teenager on the planet. If you've had a hickey or a love bite, whatever you want to call it, that's more than a trifling or transient mark. But we don't see that as illegal. And no one's going to report it. But Jesus, you look at some of our kids, just smothered in them as this ownership possession thing of saying, don't go anywhere near her, she's mine. Don't go anywhere near him, he's mine. Don't go anywhere near them, they're mine. We're really covered in them. And that's more than a trifling or transient mark. So to draw blood is then at a completely different level. It's when you start talking about the differences between GBH and ABH, and you start talking about the difference of various levels of assault. They had agreed everything. He had text, they'd spoken about it. They'd spoken about wanting sex as well. He did exactly what she wanted. She got exactly what she wanted, and they had sex. And when he woke up the next morning, she was gone. But within 15 minutes, the police were at his door and they asked him to come down to the station. And they said that he had raped and assaulted her. Fuck, like that's... Now, he'd kept all of the texts and everything else as well. And actually, they let him go and they spoke about it quite a lot. And, you know, they said, it's really good that you kept the text. And I'm going to cover this in contracts in a minute as well. So we have to be really careful, really, really careful. To make sure that we protect ourselves regardless of our gender. That's all about knowing that somebody consented to something. I want to talk in contracts a little bit about videos and all sorts in a minute. Al says, I think that mentioning to a therapist anything related to body harm where one has children is a big liability because they might report child safeguarding trumps confidentiality. Yes and no, because it doesn't involve the child. The child is not open to anything. I mean, I've done talks before and someone said to me, well, at what age can I tell my children? And I said, well, how old are your children? Why do you want to tell them? And she turned around and said, 14, and it'd be easier because I want to have some sex parties. And I said, no, no. Whereas somebody else might say, well, Do I open up to my child? I want to come out. I live in a poly situation. How can I not come out to my child? I wear a collar. Age, everything comes into it, and it is about the child's safety. However, there is a difference between private practicing therapists and publicly employed therapists when it comes to safeguarding and beneficence. And of course, children's safety trumps everything every single time. And sometimes safeguarding, even when you do the right thing. I had a 14-year-old who was backhanded and had her lip split by her father. She did a full somersault over a sofa. And when I asked for social services to get involved with her permission and her mum's permission, social services said, don't do that again to him. That was it. So it's very difficult as well. You know, some social services will come in, some will not. And I have another client who's absolutely terrified, should social services ever come in, that she would lose her child because she likes to be hit. And she's so conscious of that and so aware. G87 says, are contracts, consent forms a must in such scenes? Sounds like a safe practice. No. Let's have a look at that. Right, so scenes and contracts. So the BDSM scene is, the scene itself is, so when we use the word scene, we're talking about something that's like a pre-planned space, an activity, a scene from a play or something, where it's a situation that we're going to set up. So I've got a writing on this about setting a scene, and we'll cover that in a minute. So the BDSM scene, as far as the whole thing is concerned, is about our community. It's about clubs, it's about markets, it's about parties, it's about online, it's about the joining of a group of people to come together. That is the scene in and of itself. That's quite simple. A scene is something different. A scene is like a moment, like I said, a setup where somebody says, right, we're going to do this tonight, we're going to play. So some people might call a scene play, but some people might also really set up a really intricate scene, like an interrogation situation or a slavery situation or a selling situation. So they're actually doing a predefined, predetermined setup, a scene of what they're going to do. So there are 2 or 3 different things. So let's have a look at how to set up a scene and what to do and what that means. So I've got a writing on this already on FetLife if you want to have a look at it. It's called Setting a Scene, another all you need to know, because I wrote quite a few all you need to know pieces. They're not everything. Jesus, my ego isn't that big. Please always tell me any ideas you've got and add to them in any way, shape or form. Oh, thank you, Namori. That's very kind of you. I'm very bright red. I apologise. I'm on tablets and they make me go bright red sometimes. So setting a scene. So look, we can't multitask. We are very, very clever. We're really good and we can't do this. So we need to prepare for a scene. So setting a scene is really important. Preparation. Yes, you've got to look at consent. That really matters. Have a conversation with somebody. Maybe talk about a checklist about what someone is into. We here really are having a problem in our community of people getting banned, accused of consent violations when it's really miscommunication. Oh. Really good DOMs are getting destroyed. I think the bottom feels like a victim, but in reality, they're just not expressing their boundaries during negotiation and during the scene. And it gets very delicate because if anyone dares say that the bottom did not indicate that the scene was not okay, they're accused of victim shaming. 100%. That is absolutely happening at the moment, and it's happening quite a lot. And it's a serious concern. It was a serious concern to me, so I really agree with you. I watched a couple the other day that I was out with, and she was saying, he never fucking helps. He never does anything. I was out with some of my daughter's friends. And, you know, I have to look after the baby all the time. For fuck's sake, he should step up. And he just never does. And I'm so fed up with it. And he said, and they were doing something. He said, I'm just going to take the baby's name to go and get, so I'm going to go and change a nappy. And she went, don't fucking do that. You don't know what you're doing. Which one? How does she, like, what does that mean? And it's very interesting. And I feel sorry for women in this situation too. Let me tell you why. Because we've come from this end of here and we've blown out to here like a Newton's cradle. And some of us are going too far some of the time. It's very difficult. I would like to know how to help these bottoms learn to say no. You can get kink counsellors, you can get kink therapists, and you can also get kink life coaches. I would really love it if some of these people did get some help. So I saw a couple the other day, and I have sent the young woman to go and see the scene counsellor. And I can almost guarantee she hasn't actually, I know she won't even have contacted her yet. It might take another day. She might have done that, would be lovely. However, I have said to her, honestly, and this is interesting because is it therapeutic or is it life coach or is it genuine concern? She is an absolute danger to herself or others should she play. She is a child. She's 22. She doesn't absolutely understand how to set boundaries. And when she does, she says she wants something and then she writes in her diary the next time, I didn't really want sex. It went too far. It's not what I wanted. And I didn't want it. And now I regret it. And I just wanted a cuddle. Retroactive withdrawal of consent is a serious concern nowadays. And that sounds like a mother dearest damned either way, no matter what you do. Miscommunication isn't an excuse for consent violation. I agree. However, if somebody says, I do want that, and they actually clearly state that they want something because they feel that they should, and then it happens, and then they say someone went too far, that's very difficult as well. Pagan Princess, I need to find a kink-aware therapist with experience of treating eating disorders and post-bariatric bypass away. I just had a hell experience in a PHP program. That is very specific and very specialist. But some people have got spaces. I don't think I have any spaces at the moment, but ironically, I'm a kink active therapist and I used to be the clinical supervisor and training director of an eating disorders clinic. That's quite funny. We are here, we are around, and I work with bariatric surgery as well. So we are here. There are plenty of us who do know that sort of stuff. Funny enough, I would say, like, do you want a kink-aware therapist, a kink-practicing therapist? Like, what do those things mean? They have very different meanings to all of us. This is a good point in a sense that often incompetence is what happens rather than malicious intent. Subtle difference, but intent matters. I have a big writing called Clusterfuck, a clusterfuck scene. And there are situations where people aren't clear. And that does create a serious issue. So please look out consent. Please negotiate. Please look at what you're doing when you're going to do a scene. Sit down and pre-mortem any potential problems. Like, for example, if you're working with a little, so what do I mean by a little? So if you've got somebody who is an adult and presents as a little, that's saying, like, you know, my age when I'm in this situation is between the age of 15 and 18. I might be a middle. I might be little. I might be 3 to 7 years old. And some people will want sex in that state and some people won't, for example. So one of the common things that's happening at the moment is he or she, they didn't realise that I'd gone into a little state and I don't want sex in my little state. What are the tells? How do I know? So if I was having a scene or sex with a little, I would also be asking, is there at any point where I could tell? Is there something, or should I always check? What do I have to do here? So I would pre-mortem, yes, I know I use that word a lot, plan for all the problems and mistakes to make sure you understand everything that's going to happen and or potentially happen. And often what you find is a really good negotiator for a scene will plan for all sorts of possibilities, but only pick a few. Because, like I said, we've got a smorgasbord and too much is too much. And it's so a competent planner, a competent negotiator will have a lot of conversations about negotiating before they actually do anything with you. I think a really good message to give anybody when you are negotiating a scene is, we are playing, anything you say will not stop us from playing together. So that the submissive feels safe and then can tell you what they want. Because a lot of submissives will go, oh, I know, but I don't want to play with you, Opal Fruit, because you're the one who knows how to tie people up. So, and because you know how to tie people up, I don't really want to do any rope. I don't feel I can tell you that. Right? So let's say it goes like that. Whereas if Opal Fruit says to me, Deb, we're going to have a scene, whatever we're going to do, we're going to have some good fun and it's going to be great. And so we're going to do it. You tell me, let's work out, negotiate our limits together. Now, tops have limits too. Let's not forget that. Tops have their desires about what they want too. And often it's always focused on the submissive or the bottom. Not okay. And then he can decide. So Opal Fruit in that moment could say, actually, Deb, I only do rope scenes. So no, let's try and work something out. Or he might say, no, cool, I do that as well. Let's look at that. So if I know that there's a safety and we're going to play and we're going to have some fun together, I might be more likely to say what it is that I want and what that looks like. So that can really help us as well if we set up. Then set it up and have a really good time. I've written again about how to negotiate. I've written about consent and I've written about all of these things in the past. So you can have a look. So, write out a spider map, everything that could go right or wrong, everything that you want potentially. You can't then put that all in one scene when you're negotiating a scene. It's too much. So have a look at your planning. I would also argue a scene starts way before a scene. Tease the person, bring it out. It starts the day before, it starts in the planning. It could start in buying the clothes. It could start in making sure that you have eaten in the right way beforehand, but not eaten too much. So all of these things come into setting up a scene. It could be that you whisper something. It could be that you send them a photo of a corner of a toy or a bit of rope, and you start to play with somebody's imagination and mind, because that anticipation, fear, and excitement is really where the brain starts to kick in. We know from fMRI scans that expectation is way more erotic than actual. We know that half the things that we think about and are a massive turn on even before orgasm, for example, is that little bit before orgasm where the brain goes mad and then the orgasm hits in, if an orgasm is actually, if you're after that or not. So put in some fucking groundwork, put in some foundations to have a really good time. And if you can't manage all of that and it all feels a bit too much, just do some planning, do something, because I'll tell you, nothing kills a relationship, let alone a BDSM relationship, like disappointment. Horrific. A friend with whom I had a chance to experience some intense play, intense for me, helped me to speak up because I find it difficult to break out of obedience. And this is a really serious issue. I would say to everybody, don't be in that state to be able to negotiate. However, for some people, it isn't a state, especially if you are a fawner. So like, for example, if you're trauma-based and you fawn, so friend, fuck, fight, freeze, flop, friend, foe, fawn. If we fawn, then we're very likely to just go, yes, yes. And inside we're going, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to, yes, yes, yes. And we're still saying yes. So sometimes we have to really check, let me ask you now. Let me sort this out now, because I know you say yes. Things I wanted, but I was afraid of. One of the ways was a phrase, unless you use a safe word, I will now make you do X, Y, Z. Give me time to respond and making a choice, but without breaking the mood. Absolutely. And that can make a real difference. That's a very simple thing, isn't it? So, and also, I also don't understand, if you're going to do a scene, don't push for the safe word straight away. One of the things you can do when you can play games with numbers. Oh, that was a 3, that was a 5, that was a 6, that was a 7. Thank you, Nemoria. That is a post on a negotiation and how to. Tina, in negotiation, I like to ask the bottom, what do you look like if things are good for you? What do you look like if things are not good for you? That's a good question. And then the question is, what if they don't know? Because a lot of us don't know. And how do we look for galvanic skin responses? How do we look for eyes? What if they are tied up? What if they are wearing a fully hooded mask? What other things can we look for? And if someone goes quiet, quite enthusiastic, consent really matters. However, some of us like consensual non-consent, where we're saying no all the fucking time. And we need to define what that looks like. Safety is always the key for me when you're negotiating. If you're going to do this kind of play, are you a first aider? Do you know what you're doing? Have you had STI tests? Do you know you're fully safe? Do you know that you're okay and that they are? I mean, COVID, do you want someone to have taken a lateral flow before they play with you? There's lots of different questions that we can now ask that can come in to negotiation. And we need to work out what we want. Is it a hotel room? Is it at home? What's safer? What isn't? Is someone likely to come into a hotel room? What's going to happen? Could there be a difference? So we need to really make sure. So I had a horrific situation. I'm not going not everyone, lots of people know my whisk story, but the amount of blood over the sheets was absolutely horrifying for me as a human being afterwards. And it was a horrific accident. The person didn't mean to do it. Never mix a whisk inside a person's vagina if they're wearing a coil, right? I know it's a bingo. I know people saying it, because when you pull, if it does wrap around, the coil pulls out. So the blood is phenomenal. But what was really awful for me, because we were in a hotel, was, oh my God, the blood on the sheets. That's what bothered me more than the actual incident and having to get to the hospital. So where are you? What happens? I know it's a bingo. Also, where are you going to suspend? What are you going to do? For fuck's sake. Well, that's a bean. That'll do. Could you test the weight, please? Could you make sure that the weight's okay? Domina Ivory, this is the worst wince you've given me yet. I'm really sorry, but it's a good wince. Don't whisk anything. Get it? So, like, you need to go to 5-10 times your weight. Like, can that fucking being take that weight? What are we going to do? So plan for safety as well, please. And in hotels, think about clearing up, especially if you've got mess. Karis, your expression again, you obviously haven't heard that one before. Is that a new one on you? There might be a new one on a few people, so I apologise. Let's have a really good issue about, you need to get your head in the game for this. It could be that you ask the person to do a few small tasks before. It could be that they help set it up, or that they do something, or that they have to go for a shower, and you both thought, it's time to work it. What you don't want are surprises, unless they are planned. So surprises are not your friend in this situation. The last thing you need, if you are bound and gagged and you're having a really great time, is for a knock on the door and someone says, "Mummy, I feel sick." It is a mood killer, and it's really not great for the child. So, and make sure you've got locks on your door. Teach your children to knock. It's I taught my children to knock. My children never walk in. I mean, they're older now, but they would never walk in, because if I am doing something, it's just started and I haven't thought about locking the door, my children would always knock and I'd say, "Hang on," because I do the same for them. I have the same respect. So if I knock on one of my kids' doors, even now, if they're home I've got a couple at uni still, if they're home or whatever, they might turn around and say, "I've got 4. So that's why I say a couple. I never go in. So teach the same respect. So knocking on a door. So also, if you go too far in your fantasy setup, reality rarely lives up to that fantasy. So have a look at that. Not only safety sometimes lets let you down, but equipment that might not work well. It's enough for it to be uncomfortable in a wrong sort of way, and the session is thrown. Of course, can always improvise. That can be tricky on the spot. Yeah. I agree with that, Elle. So, and have backups. Bring 3 or 4 toys. Do different things. Like if you've got some electrical stuff and the power goes out, make sure, like for example, if you want, make sure you've got a match. Use some wax. Do something else. Like there are other things, but have a little bit of a plan in mind. Master Jim, I'm struggling to imagine the point where you gave consent to have a whisk going inside you. I tell you what, I have never thought of a whisk going inside anybody's orifice, but apparently there was someone on MasterChef who could put a whisk in their mouth. Now I ask, what kitchen implements would you think of using, and are you going to use any? Because also, and I've said this before, if you have somebody who is larger and you put a whisk inside, if you look at the vaginal walls, the way they work, there is more fat inside somebody who is larger, fatter, whatever we want to call it. Obese, morbidly obese, and actually not always obese. There is more fat inside the vaginal walls if you look at the biology and how this works. So if you do put a whisk inside someone, and it is a large balloon whisk, as you turn, you can catch some of the internal folds of the vaginal walls and you will cause horrific damage. So maybe don't choose a whisk. A rolling pin might be better. I actually know people that want that for sure. And you know what? If people want that and they consent so when we look at consent, I don't really believe in safe, sane and consensual. I think a lot of things that people do are not very safe and not very sane. However, I do think we have to be risk aware and personally responsible, which is rack and prick. So we really have to be aware of that. We do. I'm like, you cannot do that whilst I'm trying to make an omelette. You never know. Be whisk aware. See, here come the jokes. So cleanliness really matters. The cleanliness of your toys, the cleanliness of the area. And when I was talking about masturbation earlier, one of the things, like masturbation can put you in hospital for lots of reasons. Why? One of them being, if you go too hard and too fast, it doesn't matter what you've got, whether you've got a labia, whether you've got a prick, it doesn't matter. If you go too hard and too fast and you start to cause sores and openings, the bacterial infections that can occur are quite horrific. And there's a lot of natural bacteria around, which is really good for us, but foreign bodies aren't. Like lots of people, so for example, bacterial vaginosis can really happen and come from somebody having a coil actually fairly often, but also can really come from new persons come inside you because you're changing your natural flora. So we have to be really aware of what we're consenting to and how these things work. So cleanliness and awareness really matters. You shouldn't strip your body of natural oils and different things as well. You'll create things like thrush. You'll cause all sorts of different issues. However, do you need an enema if you're about to have anal? Does it matter? I love a natural smell. That's really nice, but I don't like body odor. Should the person wear deodorants and different things? So plan. think about this. And also, some people are really impacted by smell. Some people are hypersensitive. Some people have a real reaction and kind of allergic reactions to all of these things. When at the cheer competition on Saturday, when I go along, I will have a rucksack on my back, and in that rucksack will be 6 bottles of deodorant, because the kids come and use it all the time, or some of them are adults. I can go through 6 every single time. However, you're only allowed to spray it in certain areas of the arena because some people have allergic reactions to them. So you have to be very careful. And it's not very good for asthma. So you could make it part of your ritual. So, for example, if somebody, personal story again, I remember meeting somebody once who, to have sex, it was just to be casual. And he said to me, don't worry, I'm clean. And I said, sorry? He went, I used a couple of baby wipes before you popped along. I'm not kidding. I'm really sorry. Baby wipes do not clean you as much as you think they do, and they do not remove smells. So if you go near someone's arsehole and they just use a baby wipe, unless you like that sort of thing, it isn't particularly good. So you can have a ritual. You can make it part of a ritual. You can clean each other, wash each other. You can do things. You can do shaving. Have a look at fluids. Some fluids aren't a turn on. Some are. People have allergic reactions to different fluids, and different fluids impact condoms and protection in different ways. Lube with glycerin can cause really bad reactions. There we go. You can buy water-based lubes. You can buy all sorts of different lubes. But really think about this scene that you're going to go into and how it's going to work and what you're going to do. If you get fluids and wax and loads of shit on a hotel sheet, you might also be charged. So be aware. And at home, you might ruin sheets. So I had a client the other day who is part of a couple. He slept with somebody else up in the bedroom, all consented to. The reason she was upset is not because they had sex or anything else as well, but as the other person was leaving, she said, I'm really sorry I bled all over your sheets as she was going. And they know her, and she comes back often. She'd slept for a couple of nights, so the blood had dried over 2 nights. And one of the problems, she couldn't get the blood out, and that was her favourite set of sheets. So put other sheets out. It's really important. I'm coming to learn I'm highly scent driven in places, but I can smell the blown out candle smoke in a waxing, and it really helps me get into a nice headspace. Smells are really important. Temperature is really important. Sound is really important. Light is really important. Taste, touch are all really important. It's really, really important. I tell your whisk story these days, says Roy, whenever anybody asks me, I always plan everything in such great detail. Yeah. L says Cinders, people can have allergic reactions to anything. I knew someone who was severely allergic to onions, mushrooms, and tomatoes, of all things. Yes, people can be. When you're about to go and play with someone, please make sure you have a charged phone or a phone around. If you need to make an emergency call, you need to practice these things. If you're about to tie up someone with rope, practice having cut rope. I always say to people when they're about to do rope, and I bet people who do rope here would really agree with me on that. Yeah. So have a pair of safety scissors, practice cutting rope before you ever tie somebody up. That's the first thing you should practice. Actually, you've got rope, it's really precious, I know. Cut a bit off the end. What? Cut a bit off the end. Feel what it feels like, because depending on the type of rope you're playing with, it will cut in different ways, and some are different to cut. They have different feelings to them. Make sure you've got credit on your room, maybe if it's a hotel, in case you really need some food, in case you're going to some kind of drop and you're not feeling very well. Make sure you maybe bring your own towels that you can put on the bed, or your own. One way to really sort things is to bring your own sheet, but get a wheelie bin liner, put it on top of the bed, and then put another sheet on top of that, so nothing's going to go through to the bed. You can buy really cheap sheets for that, but wheelie bin liners are really good. You can also buy really, really large pads nowadays that are really good, even bigger than puppy pads for people who have incontinence issues. They're really big and they take up most of the bed, and they're completely washable, so they're a really good idea. Huge puppy pads can be really good as well, unless they're moving, because sometimes with the plastic underneath, some of them move. I recommend practice cutting rope off someone or yourself. It's a completely different experience. It is, isn't it? It's really strange just to practice cutting rope as a start here, just as to feel it and to feel different ropes. It's really important. I have Filshy clips on my tubes. I'm always fearful of bending forward over objects, furniture, or having any implements, electricals used on my lower abdomen. Yes, I had a daughter who had a colostomy bag for ages, and we have to think about all these things and how these things work. And whatever illnesses, whatever situations we're in, whatever conditions we've had and what we've got. And the invisible ones like hypermobility spectrum disorder, if you tie someone in a certain way, actually you could be really causing some damage to the ligaments and joints if they're a zebra. And there are so many things that we need to look at and take into consideration. So make sure your phone is charged, please. Make sure, like, if you know if someone's borrowing it or what they're doing, make sure your toys are there unless you really want to make where's the fucking whip sexy? I mean, it might not be, like, have your stuff out, be prepared, it really helps. Practice cutting your rope also lets you know if your rope cutter scissors are good enough. They go very blunt very quickly, those safety scissors. I would say they need renewing probably at least once a year if you're a massive rope user. If you ever have to cut, they go pretty blunt pretty quickly. Make sure you charge your camera if you want to take photographs, unless you're using your phone. Make sure your toys are clean. Bring something to help clean your toys. I've got a massive writing, sorry, Nemoria, on how to clean all sorts of toys in all sorts of different ways, because they're very, very complex toys, and there are a lot of rules around plastics, lubes, all sorts of things, and all of their chemical interactions. So learning how to clean toys is really important as well, and a lot of people don't know how to clean toys. Again, think about drinking. EDC scissors are designed for single use. So yes, some are, so that can be really handy as well. For me, when I talk about consent, it means freely given. So if somebody's in a bad mood or somebody isn't in an okay space and they still say, yeah, but we've planned this, we've got to do it, that isn't real consent. Sometimes we have to pull back and say, is this truly what you want? Because this scene can really go horrifically wrong. Temperature matters. I just mentioned it. If you've got a window open because you want some fresh air, it can be really nice. However, if you're dressed and the other person isn't, or vice versa, the temperature needs of both are really different. We don't want someone going into hypothermia. We don't want someone, there's a difference. So people can get cold as a form of shock, as a reaction to pain. Are they too cold? I'm guessing Dettol or Zoflora with a cleaning won't cut it. Depends on what you're cleaning, Liv. Depends, like leather and other things, absolutely not. Some of them, absolutely yes. So that's a writing where you can learn. And I've asked people who really know what they're talking about as well to share with me the best ways to do that. So please be really aware. So different people of different sizes feel heat differently. Somebody with an eating disorder, with a domina, a friend just messaged me, send me notes from Kink Shrink. I'll tell her, oh my God, she told the whisk story, all the cringe. I'm famous, thanks. I'm not, but thank you. So be really careful of people's size as well. So like, I'm always warm, so I'll always tell you that I'm warm. If I'm cold, that's pretty serious for me. I can go out in a snowstorm and probably wear very little and still feel warm. So don't just shove someone in water, especially if you have a temperature. It's like having a baby. Please be really, really careful. So especially if someone's having shock or a drop or a reaction to pain or something along those lines, please be careful. Also, if somebody is really cold and they're shivering or moving, that changes your target and it changes the response in ropes. So if someone's shivering and they're in rope, the rope starts to move, depending on the rope. But let's say you've got something like hemp that moves over each other and it starts to catch. If the person is really hot and they're sweating and they're in hemp, the way hemp responds to water and other ropes, depending if it's a synthetic rope or different things, you wouldn't believe I don't like ropes. I don't like ropes, but I studied a lot about ropes. So if you've got different forms of ropes, they'll respond differently to sweat and water. So some of them can tighten and restrict, and some of them can expand, which can ruin the tie. So please be really careful about temperature. If you are planning something really extreme, if you are planning on doing choking, which is really trendy, please make sure you really know how to resuscitate someone, and please make sure you know everything about choking. Again, sorry, Nemoria, I've got a massive writing on choking. This is really getting boring, everything I'm saying. Choking isn't as easy as you think it is. There are very different forms of choking. There are different ways to do it. There are blood chokes. There are airway chokes. There are very different ways. You can make people pass out and all sorts. It's phenomenally dangerous. It's edge play. Everybody seems to like it at the moment. Breath play is really coming in as the trend. It's pretty dangerous unless the person knows what they're doing. There are, if you look at the writing, in the last 10 years, mainly women, I'm afraid, who have actually died from being choked. And often that's when alcohol is involved. There was one where somebody claimed that she really liked it recently. He'd had 11 bottles of alcohol On the way, he drove to her house, and he choked her out. And he said she really wanted it and she liked it. It was an accidental death. He had 11 bottles of alcohol, which is the equivalent to around 20 to 24 units of alcohol. Of course he was done. Of course he should be done. That's really serious. That we've got to be very careful. And waterboarding seems to be on the up again. People really like the idea of waterboarding. It's a extreme form of torture. Know your medical stuff. If you're going to waterboard someone, none of what I give is medical advice. I take no responsibility. You must do your own research. I say that. That is not accidental. That's absolute incompetence, idiocy. I'd agree with you. There is no way to do breath play safely. It's inherently dangerous. Correct. And people make stupid little mistakes. Like you take your belt off and you put it around someone's neck. That little thing that can make the difference between life and death. If you're going to have a belt in your play stuff, take that fucking little thing out for a start, so it can't catch, so it can't make a difference. Also, waterboarding has a very different medical response to breath play and other things. And a lot of people get this wrong. They will turn around and put someone in a recovery position and try and pump and do stuff, whereas actually they need to sit up and do different things. So please do your research really carefully, because drowning on land, not because of too much water, which does a very different thing to the brain, but by swallowing too much water and having too much, and where it's gone and where it's got into your lungs needs a very different response. These two things are life-alteringly dangerous. And there was a very famous case recently on FetLife where somebody ended up in a terrible state and their life was absolutely ruined. And I think the medical bills were like 380,000 alone. It was a she who did it. It broke up their relationship eventually. He has permanent brain damage and he was fitting on a regular basis. He will never have a normal job again. So are you going to stay there and look after that person? Are you going to pay their medical bills? Is it your responsibility? Whose is it? Please think about these things before you do them, because we might think, oh, that's a really sexy idea, but you haven't looked through the possibilities when you're setting up these scenes. A scene is really important about its ambience. The smells in it, the lighting, how it is. People who are waterboarded can go through a second drowning phase. It's so dangerous. Yes, that's what I was meaning about how you sit someone up and what you do. And it's the same for paracetamol overdoses. There is a secondary phase that's lethal, and it's the same with waterboarding. So that scene, the senses matter. Do you want some smells in there? Like somebody just said earlier, I really like smells. What sort of smell do you want? Find out what they like, because if you've got shit tons of a certain smell that they don't like, it's going to ruin the mood. So please be really careful. So yes, what allergies do people have to sense, to waxes, to different things? Please know your candles. If you're going to play with wax, you don't just pick up a candle from a home store and pour it on somebody, because the burning temperatures of different levels of candles have a big impact. And there was a thing recently where somebody tied some up and held it over a candle. And when he held her over a candle, he held her over the candle for too long. She didn't feel the burn because it become white, so like a white burn. And she's had to have skin transplants and everything. And she has a hole in her stomach that's like this. Fucking hell, people, do your homework, please. If you want to play with somebody around sound, you can use headphones, noise cancelling headphones. You can play sounds. You can use blindfolds, all sorts of different things. Do you want certain lists of music? Is there a warm-up music? Is there a during music? Is there a cool-down music? What do you want to do? Colours matter as well. People say, if you're going to bring someone into a black darkened room, which is what most dungeons are with red and black, everyone's got that feeling. Even look at 50 Shades of Grey. I know, all have a go at me. It was called the Red Room, wasn't it? It was dark, it was black, it was red. It creates a mood. Does classical music better? Do you want something thumping going on? What's a good soundtrack? What are you going to do? Candles, colours, all of those things, smells make a real difference. When I met that person at the hotel with a whisk, it was knock on the door, and close your eyes, and he put a pillow straight over my head. I didn't even see who he was until the whisk was pulled out, and that's something that we both agreed on and wanted, because it adds to it and it's quite cool. Until that point. Music as well. There is one person to whose home I am not going back again because the music was so bad and or too loud, so you can't be heard. So then think about safety. So for example, if you're doing something you want someone to safe word, if you can't hear them, or if they've got a gag in and different things as well, make sure they've got like a bouncy ball that's colourful, or a set of keys that are really loud that you also can't hear. So if you've got a lot of loudness going on in the scene, get one of those kids' bouncy balls, make your submissive hold it, and if they drop it and it bounces colour, you stop instantly. That's one of the best, easiest ways to sort out something if it's a really dark or a really loud room. And music can really put you off. There are some clubs that are all about the music, and I'll just be going like, fucking, I can't bear that, that's horrific. So noise really makes a difference, because you don't want grandma knocking on the door, you don't want the police knocking on the door, you don't want that. So where are we going to go with this? Like, are the windows open? Aren't they? What about the temperature? That all makes a difference. Energy is really important. Setting up a scene is also all about food, before, during, afterwards. If you give someone too much to eat, they can vomit, clearly. High sugar and carbs brings a very high hit. It also brings a really dropping low. So you want protein complex carbs, way better for beforehand, so you start to feel better for it. Have water with you. Please make sure everyone's drinking enough water. There is a lot of shit about we have to drink 8 whatever cups a day or 4 litres. A lot of that is a fallacy. It's just a very salesy thing. It's not true, actually, if you look into. So if you worry that I know that what I'm talking about, I am a nutritionist, but what it's worth, I don't listen to anything I do. A dietitian is clearly way better and way more informed than I am, but even through working with eating disorders, I decided to become qualified as well, so that really mattered. So, you know, a lot of that stuff about water isn't particularly great. So please make sure that you are very careful around food, what you're feeding someone with allergies, everything else as well, and don't just bring sugar and chocolate, because that hit and drop can make someone feel pretty shit. Kara says, I went to TG and it was all, is that how that good in your head? Is that the right sort of thing? I don't know if I've done that right there. Even in the play area. Yeah, so how can you have conversations? Because actually a lot of people just want a really quiet space, so think about that too. Think about your energy. If you are in a really bad mood, or they have to do that noise again, is that a question or a directive, Jim? Come on. Kara, you clearly haven't heard the latest album. It's great. Changing that again. Adam Ruins Everything did a video about the false myth of drinking water. Yeah. Yes. Thanks for that. It's very true, Al. Master Cheer is laughing at me now. Thank you very much. So please make sure, you know, like often what you'll find is you're more likely to have a better time with an orgasm or with playing after you've worked out, because your endorphins and your dopamines and your all the different drugs that are in your body are actually already on a slight high if you do it well enough and you're not dropping. So sometimes a little bit of a workout can help beforehand. However, if you're in a really bad mood and you're stressed, that might help. Or do you need to meditate? Do you need to calm down? Have you got a headache? Oh, is your head okay? When I'm working at the cheer gym, when we're working on people's attitudes and how they're going to work and their mental blocks and what they're doing, how do you leave your shit at the door? Is a really big thing, because it's going to ruin a play session or a scene that you've got going on. Please, whatever you do, have a fucking data agreement. I believe in having it. People know here, one of the things I ask submissives to do often is to write your own Haynes manual. Haynes, we're all baked beans. Have your own Haynes manual, your own guide to yourself. And part of that for me is having a data agreement. What is your agreement around data, around filming, around photographs, around where they get put up, by whom, how, who has rights to them, what does it mean? Because as soon as somebody has your photographs, you might think that's a nice thing, but it just disappears out the window. You have no rights over it anymore. You think you do, but they're gone and they're out there. It's not necessarily going to ruin your life, and it can actually also get you murdered or killed, depending on what's happening, and depending on your religion, and depending on your culture. So please be aware of these sorts of things. So please, over pictures, filming, recording, whether it's sound or anything else as well, have a fucking data agreement. It takes ages to get something taken down on the media, on social media or anywhere else. And revenge porn, although it's illegal, it's still done. And please be aware that any data you record, because you cannot, Memoria, thank you, delete that shit. That's about that. So get it written down, because it's really important that you're aware of it, and data can be used against you. So when we go back in time and we look at some really important cases that happened that defined as to whether BDSM is illegal, so I'm talking about the Spanner case here. At one point, the prosecution wanted to bring in a video, but they weren't allowed to bring the video in. But incredibly, one of the submissives, so if you don't know about the Spanner case, it was a really important case, have a look at it, look it up. I'm not going to go into it now. But importantly, the defense case brought the video in. But it was, when they brought that in, that's what made all of the prosecutors, they were doing very extreme stuff like testicles, nails, hammers, very extreme stuff, real edge play. And then because we can't consent to violence against us, that is what made the law about trifling and transient. And we look at Brown and other cases as well. And that's also what got them into trouble. So the data you have on your phone can actually be used as evidence against you. And you might say, well, no, I can wipe it. It ain't that fucking easy. You think just by wiping something it's gone? It's just not that simple. So please be careful. Thank you, Jerry. So that's about Operation Spanner. And the reason it became such a big thing is because it was such a massive amount of money spent on it. John says, my view is that if you split up, any prior consent for posting pictures is void. Yes, but does your partner know that? Where have you written it down? What are you going to do? How does the other person know? And is it just about a picture? Do you mean your normal day-to-day pictures, or do you mean just your sexual pictures? Do you mean a video? We've got to be clear about these things. And also, if you do want to record, please make sure it's all... if someone's wearing a GoPro on their fucking head as they're doing you, that's just not going to do it for me. I'd rather the GoPro was held up here, so filming it in a different way, or that, oh, sorry, it's just turned off, and they stop. I'm sorry, what matters more, me or the fucking GoPro? So make sure things are charged, make sure things are on. Talking of data on phones, beware if you travel, I was just about to cover that, with different border controls have different rules. So I was just about to say, I'm going to America in April, May, because I'm going to Summit, cheerleading, that is. We've got another team going to defend their championship title, and we've got another one going as well. And what I'm very aware of, especially when I go over to America, is the law states when I go from my border to their border is that they can look at the data on my phone if they so wish. If I have a set of photographs that are very explicit, I really get on social media, people love the photographs with all the marks. It's a thing of glory, it's a thing of possession and ownership, and it's very cool, isn't it? It looks really sexy, and that's the sort of fucking shit that can get you prosecuted. Does it happen that often anymore? No. Could it? Yes. Is it worth it? We also have, as well, in the last 3 years, was it 3 years ago, 2 years ago? COVID's got me a bit confused. The first man was also prosecuted for having images that were considered child pornography that were a drawing. So when we get into that whole... there are lots of cultural things around drawings and different things as well, but it was considered that this drawing was of a child, therefore he got prosecuted for having child pornography. Moria, the USA will demand complete access to your social media as well as all of your devices. Absolutely. Melendine says, my partner's ex had very NSFW pictures of him on FetLife. I only found out when I viewed her profile and recognised him. Thankfully, they're on okay terms, so she deleted them after being asked, even though he didn't want them on there ever. I've just had a few clients have this situation as well. What FetLife have done to change things nowadays is you can tag the other person in it, and if the other person tags, you can demand that it's tagged. You can ask for it to be taken down. However, my client... her ex came back with a completely different name, said her name in the picture, but didn't tag her in it. So somebody else told her about it. And then she had to come back and say, fucking take it down, because he put a whole load of pictures up because he's a photographer. Dressing up. If you're going to plan for a scene and you really like dressing up, some love it, some hate it. I'm a hater. I fucking hate it. I fucking hate it. Other people fucking love it. So which sort of person are you? For some, it's an absolute fetish. And do you want to be a fetish hanger? Is it about the corset or is it about you? Rubber, nylons, corset, PVC, heels. I prefer just fucking get me naked and let's get on with it. But we're all different. If you're going to buy something to someone, make sure you get the right size. There is nothing worse than saying, I bought you this and it just about fits for their right kneecap. That will ruin your mood, I'm telling you now. It won't work. Scandi, that's interesting. I guess with today's deepfake computer technology, images can potentially look 100% like real people. They can. However, people are getting clever at working out what is and isn't real as well. I remember a case like that here. Partner did some NSFW comics of their little in their likeness as a petite person, and they got charged for CP, as they said the illustrations were children. Oh, God. Yes, so please be careful. So with the dressing up as well, body issues, body confidence, anything, be really careful. Look, humiliation is fucking sexy if you consent to it. It isn't sexy if you do not consent to it. So please be really careful. If you're going to start to wear things like dressing up, if you're going to use strap-ons, dildos, different things, make sure they fit, make sure they work, make sure they're the right size for the other person. Can the person wear heels? Like, for example, if you're going to do breath play and breath control and somebody's wearing really fucking high heels, and you decide to go and do a blood choke hold and you do something and they go down and you don't hold them, that's a broken ankle or a twisted ankle. It's a smacked head. It's all sorts of things. So clothes impact play, access, everything. Scandial says, yes, but child porn can look real even if it is not. Yes, it can. Objectification is sexy, but is it okay? Please think about marks, bruise, long-lasting things as well. What is impact and what is impact on your life is a question I always ask. I'm into impact, but is that an impact on my life? So if you're going to give me a black eye, what am I doing for the next week? What am I going to, it's really important about, have you worked out how you're going to explain that and what you're going to do if you consented to it? I agree with you, Louise. I felt the clothing was more important than me. And sometimes it is. Like, I want to see you in that blouse. I want to see you in those heels. I want to see you in that outfit. And it's that. Please understand someone's medical conditions. Please understand the medication they're taking, because it really impacts what you can do. Work out, somebody needs to sit afterwards. I sit on my ass all fucking day. That's what I do for a living. I've got a lot of clients. I'm busy. I sit on my ass for 50 to 60 hours a week by the time I do all workshops and different things. That's a lot of sitting. So if I've got bleeding or different things, it's really important. We talk to the kids a lot about self-harm in cheer. And if they do self-harm, a lot of them can't then do cheer because they have to grab them in all sorts of places on their thighs, their sides, their arms for safety. And if your hand goes on and you just rip something open, you've got to be very careful. And it's the same for human beings. Please be careful if someone's on blood thinners, especially, and different forms of medication have different impacts on our well-being. And also make sure you understand about their disabilities, their allergies, any illnesses that they've got. I've been asked not for next week, but the week after, because next week I think I'm doing ADHD and the implications around sex and sexuality and kink, the crossover. But I've been asked if I'll do another disability session the week after. So we'll also then be covering disability. So that's the next one for one of those. When I talk about physical health, can you also please ask about mental health and mental health drugs? Please be aware that lots of psychopharmaceuticals, well, I talked about this, I did a whole session, was it 3 weeks ago, on psychopharmaceuticals and the impact on kink and play and sex. A lot of them will stop someone from having an orgasm. A lot of them will interfere with our pleasure. So please be aware of what they're on and how it works. Please be really careful. Allergies, latex, gloves, condoms, lubes, people could be allergic to semen even. So I had a couple many years ago, and actually she was in the 0.02% of human beings. They were physically allergic to each other. So every time he came inside her, she had a massive allergic reaction. One of the things I'm talking about in my masturbating piece as well is, for some men, there is a condition whereby they get incredibly ill once they've ejaculated. They have flu-like symptoms. They're really ill for anywhere between 5 to 7 days. And it's purely linked to ejaculation. So be aware of shit. Even if it is a very small percentage, you could come across it. You really can. So please be careful. So about those sort of things, be careful. Please as well, I was speaking to this friend again last night, and he said he drinks, so they do water sports, which is all about urine play, and he drinks his partner's piss. She is on chemo. She's on tableted chemo. And I said, do you know what dose? And he said, no, it doesn't matter. I went, it really fucking matters. So after I was on chemo, I wasn't allowed to do any liquid or even kissing for 2 to 3 days after my intense dose of IV chemo, because I'm not radioactive, but the chemo can pass through liquids into the other person's body. So please be careful about this shit. You need to know that stuff. You really need to know that stuff. So please think about that. We also then talk about contracts, so people can write things down and agree things. Let me tell you now, same way for folks that get multiple infusions for multiple sclerosis. Yes, all sorts of things that are infused into our body. Like, I have something called zonandronic acid. I don't anymore. It's just stopped. However, when that's in my system, that's really in my system. And it's not really going to cause you any problems. It's just going to help your bone density, if anything. But it depends on what you are having. So please be careful. I agree with Pagan Princess there. Contracts. Brilliant idea. Fuck all. A contract is not legally binding. It doesn't have any legality in any form of court anywhere. I spent so long not letting my fluids touch anyone during chemo. I can't believe that anyone thinks that's okay. It's a lack of knowledge. That's all it is. Right, let me just speed through contracts. So we go on to polyamory glossary. So we've got that going as well. So a contract is basically, it can be anything. So it can be, yes, they are 2 hours now, Jerry. Sorry. I need to go eat. See you Sunday. See you later. Dominic Gallant just nearly passed out the idea of this contract meaning nothing. I'm really sorry. So your contract means a lot to you as two human beings. A contract can be a paragraph. It can be absolutely pages. You can sign them as an owned submissive. You can sign them as a top, you can sign them as a slave. However, they mean nothing in law. They will not protect you. What they will show is your intent, that the other person agreed. However, you cannot prove a lack of coercion. And that's the other thing that now comes into it. So legal contracts don't exist. Contracts will help you show intent. And one of my clients said, yeah, but I got a video consent the other day. And I say, brilliant. What did it say? That I said to her, are you agreeing to everything? And we're having sex and we're doing this and we're doing that. And she was like, yeah, I do. Can you prove that there isn't a gun on the other side of the fucking camera? Can you prove as you're recording here that there isn't a gun here? No, you cannot. And if you cannot prove that, it just means nothing. It means nothing at all. There is a subreddit forum, which is really interesting, where men, mainly men, are recording sex sessions, not for pleasure and without permission, by the way. So there's no consent, because basically they would rather go down to having filmed it illegally to prove that there was consent there than for false allegations against them. And there's a massive movement. It's not related to incels at all, actually, because you think it would be. It's not. They're always moaning that they're not having sex. In some areas, a contract is called evidence. It can be brought in as evidence. It isn't. It's not going to save your ass. It shows intent. That's a problem. So contracts can be all sorts of things. It can be, what's the agreement here? How long is this going to last? What are our responsibilities? What are our soft limits, our hard limits? What's the discipline that's coming in here? What's punishment? What's our privacy? So it's all the same things that we've negotiated, just written down in paper. And it can be really good because it does show that you've thought about these things, that you've had some kind of conversation. So it might help you. And it's actually just a really nice thing. Like, I remember signing ownership contracts at times. It's really nice. It can feel really lovely. Like, oh my God, this is like a marriage. This is like an intent in our relationship. It's bigger collaring someone than marriage to some people. Living together, collaring, it can be really important. It can be used against you, the dominant, and it can also be used against the submissive, because what we can also say in it is, but you said you do this, therefore you've got to, it's in the contract. And we can say, yes, but you made me do this because it's in the contract. Everything can be used negatively and positively. So I'm just saying, be careful with contracts. They're a great idea. You can get loads online. There's a place called bdsmcontracts.org. They have a shit ton of contract ideas, templates, and all sorts of stuff. There's loads of this stuff around, so it's easily got. Okay, let's talk about polyamory. Sorry, I'm rushing through because I finish at 9, so this could take me forever. UK law, can you audio record sex without consent? Do you know what? You can record a recording of anybody without their consent. It depends what you do with it. The same as you can take photographs. So we say to people, like, for example, at an outside munch, that you can't take a photograph of me. But actually, there's nothing in law. That's about kindness. That's about respect. That's about care. So UK law is quite interesting. You can do a lot of things without consent. It depends what you do with it. That's one of the keys. However, somebody might know law better than I do and might have a lot more to say about that. Oh, I'm really flushing and really hurrying. Sorry. Okay, let's talk about polyamory. What's polyamory? So what are you not allowed to do with it? Put it anywhere for anyone. And actually, you know, and if somebody has said to you, do not record me without my consent and do not use it for your sexual pleasure, then you're breaking a verbal contract. So that's slightly different as well. So you can't put it anywhere. However, if you record sex, so audio record is also slightly different. If you record sex and it's pictures, different laws. Show it to someone. Yep, let them hear it or anything. You've just broken a law. So, okay, polyamory, ethical non-monogamy. What are we talking about? So it's a bit of a fucked up word. It's kind of Greek and Latin. It's a bit of a mess, really. And polyamory, playing it to your solicitor is problematic. I like that. That's quite funny. It is, however, that's not untrue. So Ethical non-monogamy is, so the way a lot of relationships are set up in a lot of societies nowadays is monogamy is key. So the idea of monogamy is that you meet one person, you have sex and love with one person, monogamy, and you stay together. However, we are serial monogamous nowadays because we've gone from one to the other and one to the next, to the next, to the next. The idea of polyamory is about multiple people and multiple love. Notice I didn't say gender of any kind, it's about multiple, if that makes a difference. So, I've gone to a glossary. And I've gone to a glossary because I will absolutely forget. So everything else I've done, mainly off the top of my head, there's no way I can remember all these words. It's like passing a test. So let's go through them a little bit. Okay, so polyamory is all about being non-monogamous and ethically. And we're going to go through all sorts of different things. So ethical non-monogamy is this huge umbrella about a load of terms that we can use to talk about people. Lots of people, we think often, because we deal with polyamory a lot and we deal with BDSM, that everyone knows about it. The truth is they do not. If you look at the statistics for the UK, I'm not quite sure what they are in America or other countries. I apologise because I look at my own statistics and stats. I'm really sorry I don't look around the world. But when you look at this, what people are actually doing here is 6% of people in the UK admit to being LGBTQI. 4% say that they're polyamorous. So it's a tiny percentage of human beings, but we think it's a shit ton because it's our circle and we think that everyone does it. However, polyamory is on a huge increase and it's becoming more and more popular. It's definitely the thing of the moment. The same as Daddy was maybe a couple of years ago and still is. So there are different, what I've found being on the scene for 40 years is things tend to happen in trends every 6 to 8 years. And Daddy was never allowed. Poly has definitely come in and out of trends. However, it's probably bigger than it ever has been. So let's have a look at some of the terms that are used around polyamory and also slightly other things. I get such a culture shock when I hang out with vanilla monogamous friends. I know, right? Or if you go to something and you think, oh, this is what other people consider to be normal. This isn't my normal. Fuck, what is normal? Although I did have someone come up to me at a cheer competition, absolutely publicly, and say, oh my God, are you the kink shrink? Talk about inappropriate. Fucking hell. In front of children. And I said, inappropriate comment. She went, oh, I'm sorry. I'll talk to you about it later. And I was like, oh, I wasn't impressed. No. So, yes, exactly. So this is normal. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Pagan Princess. We are so used to this because I sit at Lamb sometimes when I'm eating maybe a curry or a pizza or whatever it is that I'm eating. And I'm watching someone going past me dressed in latex, riding a latex pony. And I go, oh, yeah, I'm here again. It's like, you know, and I'm in a bar. It's like a revolution bar. So I have to sort of turn around and I think, am I in it? Oh, that's okay. But if I go into a bar, I'm like, no, there are no latex ponies. Okay, right. Or no puppies or no anything else. So there's a real difference in the surroundings that we have and the expectations that we have. And it's why a lot of people look for kink therapists, kink counsellors, kink life coaches, and kinky people, because it's different. It's when people put +1 on a wedding invite. To whom? Yeah, +3. I've got 2 partners. I've got 3 partners. Okay, so let's talk about polyamory. The structures and the varieties of this really vary. As I say, I am reading a glossary because I'm just going to forget some of these. So let's brush through them. ACE. ACE is an abbreviation for asexual, sometimes used as part of a longer or a larger self-identification. Asexual. Agender. A person identifies as agender if they feel that neither binary gender applies to them and identifying in a place or a spectrum of those genders upholds their gender binary. Different individuals use this term differently, and some people use it interchangeably with non-binary. Typically, agender and non-binary gender identifiers are falling under the transgender umbrella. Anchor partner, a partner who one regards as a central figure in one's life. So that's the person that is the one that's always there as such. Often people use that sort of term in non-hierarchical relationships for someone's equivalent of a primary partner or a nesting partner or somebody else. So an anchor partner is that one person that's the one that's always there. It might be the person that you're married to. It might be the person that you're not married to. It might be the person that you live with. Again, nesting. Could be primary, could be. So when we use it, we're going to come on to primary and non-hierarchical, so keep those things in your head. Asexual. Asexual is having a low or non-existent sexual imperative or interest. And there are lots and lots of categories that come under that as well. When we talk about poly, we also talk about barriers. So barriers are actually mainly talking about sex. So that's about sexual fluids. Most people refer to condoms, but we've also got dental dams, gloves, different things. So sometimes we might put those barriers in place. Are you going to put this glossary as a writing on FET? No, you can have a look at it. It's called readyforpolyamory.com. It's there. I'm reading from it, so I'm being really honest here, so I remember. Otherwise, I'm not going to remember all of these terms. So just look at ready for polyamory, not term. Would further specify agender as feeling that no gender applies as opposed to simply non-binary. They're completely interchangeable. So the thing about most of these words are, what do they mean to you? And when we ask someone about who they are and what that means, often when someone says I'm asexual or I'm agender, I will say, I know what that means. What does it mean to you? Because if we don't ask that question, especially as a therapist as well, or even as if we're going to play with someone or meet somebody, let's ask those questions, because I don't know what that means to you. Like when someone says, well, I have a boundary about that, or I have a limit. Can you tell me what that means? It's a really important question, because what I think it is, what a dictionary definition is, and what they think it is are completely different things. And often when I'm working with couples, what I find is that people say, well, I want, let's think of a word. I want stability. Do you both know what that means to each other? Do you know what's the difference there? And what do you mean by that? So often in couples therapy, it's often about, like, what do these words even mean? And I think especially in kink and polyamory as well, what do they mean to you? Because there are so many. Bisexual, having an attraction to an either or gender. It's a little specific, bisexual. So your gender and another gender. Bisexual used to be such a bad word. I don't need to write this all out, Gallant. Yes, you don't. I'm reading this as again because there's no way I'm going to remember all of these. I would just go randomly everywhere. So bisexual used to be, oh, you're a bit greedy. That's the only thing that I could come out as when I was 17, 15, 16, 17, because there wasn't demisexual, which is definitely what I am, which is more about being attracted to having a connection with a human being. That said, slept with so many people, definitely wasn't me, but it definitely more is me now. So bisexual is an old phrase that talks about one gender or another gender. Chosen family. So what people tend to do, especially in polyamory, they talk about their chosen family, especially if they don't want their family or they've been ousted by their family because of their sexual and gender choices. And even if they see it as not a choice. So that's really important as well. So because of the shared values, because of the emotional support, that's my chosen family now. That's who I'm with, and that's how it looks like, and that's what it matters. That's what matters to me. If anybody's got anything to add on any of these, please do. Cisgender. Cisgender is the identification of your gender at birth. So a lot of people will say cis-born. And why do we need that? Well, it influences biology. It influences hormonal responses and chemicals, and it influences someone's upbringing. So for example, if I'm working with someone who's transitioned at a different age, I'm still going to be curious about that because of the influence on them growing up and the impact that it has on their patterns, the impact that it had on them and who they were at that time. Right, so let's talk about closed polycules and polyfidelitous relationships. So that means when you close a polycule, so a polycule is a group of people that are in a relationship with each other. However, that relationship is defined in a myriad of ways where they close it. So it might be that there's 4 of them, there's 6 of them, there's 3 of them, but it's a closed relationship now. So we're saying, so some people call it polyphy, some people call it polycules. I'm very used to the word polycule. It's now a closed polycule. So when we're in a polycule, we're a group of people. When we've closed it, we're not open to seeing anybody else until we're open to seeing someone else. So it's closed. We don't go anywhere else. We're not interested in seeing anybody else. Polypod, yeah. So again, see, fucking thousands of terms that we use, but C comes into it. Comet, right? So that comet is a long distance relationship. So I, for example, have a client who lives with one of her partners, and her other partner comes from America. He is a comet. They pick up their connection. They only see each other every so often, and there are other relationships in place. So a comet is somebody who's probably quite far away in distance or doesn't see the other partner very often. So that's a comet partner. Compersion. Compersion is about, some people call it the antithesis of jealousy. It's not. It's not. I'm really sorry, people. It isn't. Jealousy is an absolute fear of loss. That's what's really going on underneath jealousy. So people say, well, I don't want you to do that. We look for control because we're very frightened of what we're about to lose. The compassion is about the complete happiness of what somebody else is doing with somebody else, whether it's an emotional relationship, a sexual relationship, or moments. And some people do refer to it as the opposite of jealousy. I don't agree with that. Compassion is just pure joy. Jealousy is a fear of loss. It's not, I want you to stop that. It's, I want you to stop that because I'm frightened that you might leave me. There's a real difference in those experiences. Cowboys and cowgirls. This is quite a recent phrase that's come up. So again, that's quite gender-based as well. So this is for somebody who says, yes, I'm polyamorous. And then when they get in a relationship, they try and pull them away to make them monogamous. So it's kind of like a rodeo type ride where they've pulled them in and it's not fair. So there are lots of people who do this. There are lots of people who say, I'm poly. I would really love to be poly. And then they put all these interesting boundaries around you. So eventually you become monogamous. That's what they're after. My ex is Domina, unfortunately. Right, DADT is the short form of don't ask, don't tell. Some people in their relationship structures, especially when they're polyamorous, is I don't care what you do in the nicest of ways. Go and have fun. Just don't tell me. And then other people say, don't ask, don't tell. So that's quite just a shortened phrase. And those relationships are honestly quite formal at times. I love it when we say we allow people to see somebody else. So that's interesting as well. So a don't ask, don't tell relationship is often actually when somebody doesn't really want to be poly, is not so much into this, but it's just like, I know you need to go and get your fucking rocks off or whatever, so just go and do it, just don't let me know. And those don't ask, don't tell relationships are very non-consensual. Karen, you're absolutely right, they're very manipulative. That person is going out trying something in order to control the other person to make something happen. So the don't ask, don't tell relationships are often hi Mal, nice to see you. Hi. It can be really manipulative for somebody as well. It's not consensual because not everybody knows the situation. So it might be that the person in this relationship goes out and gets laid there, but doesn't tell them they've got a partner at home. But what about the sexual implications of that? What about the safety implications of that? And some people call it parallel polyamory as well. But it's very extreme, and that's not something I particularly like because I don't think consent is in it. A dyad is a relationship of two people. That can be monogamous or all sorts of different things. It could be two people that are in a greater circle, a polycule or anything else as well, but it's that. Ethical non-monogamy is where, and that's why I have an issue with don't ask, don't tell relationships. It's all about that structure where everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows that this is where we are, this is what we consent to, and we're agreeing to it, which is a very different thing. It makes a difference. We talked about barriers earlier, and people talk about fluid bonding, but we can fluid bond whether we're polyamorous or not. Fluid bonding is basically, I'm not going to use any form of barrier for the sexual activity we have. Often that can be around liquids, that can be around urine, semen, it can be around liquids that, you know, cunt owners can also, a lot of that is urine anyway, that's another story. So it's liquids basically that can be used, any form, oral, manual, any form of sex, and it can also mean blood as well. And often people will have a lot of tests beforehand before they fluid bond, so that's there as well. Friend with benefits, self-explanatory. A mate you see, somebody you know who you basically have sex and or play with, but you probably don't have a greater and emotional or romantic connection as you do with other poly partners. A frubble is being frubless or feeling frubble is another word for compersion. Again, that's quite a new word as well. Genderqueer is like, I want to take myself out of the binary category, and it falls, so queer, I identify as queer, but it's a word that people don't like so much anymore because it's been used to slag and slander and have horrible names attached to it. But I've identified as queer since I was 17. That is my identity. So I'm staying with that one. Heterosexual, one binary to another binary. Hierarchical relationships. So hierarchical relationships are exactly what they say. There is a hierarchy. This relationship matters more than this relationship. So we will have this. And what you often find is these people are unicorn hunters. So unicorn hunters, we'll come on to what a unicorn is in a minute. It's often a couple who are hierarchical because they matter the most. And this person is more like, they would like them to be more like a satellite or a comet. You come into our life sometimes when it suits us, when we want sex. Couples privilege is a real thing. So hierarchical relationships can be really good. I can be quite hierarchically poly actually in my own way. So it's just something, does it work for you, doesn't it? But my hierarchy is always consented agreement. We do it as a 3 rather than the 2 giving it to the 1 or the other 3 or 4. So we have to be careful of that. So hinge is the person where 2 other people are meeting in. So that's the hinge. So that's the person that 2 people are seeing. Homosexual, own gender, sexual attraction. KTP is kitchen table polyamory. That is where like, for example, kitchen table polyamory is where everybody's kind of involved. Everybody talks about it. We sit down and we discuss, go for it, have this, but have close relationships. It comes from a network and about reading a book from a long time ago. So it's all about the multiple aspect of the relationships is encouraged by the group. And you'll often find people in polycules like this might be living together or living very close together, and everything's encouraged and talked about, and everybody loves the relationship principles going on. Limerence. I've written about limerence before. Limerence is obsession. Limerence is not a good thing. I know people talk about it here fairly often, but limerence isn't a good thing. It's when a romantic attachment becomes very obsessive. Now, of course, that can happen in new relationship energy. I have a writing on the dangers of new relationship energy. It can be really dangerous. It's also fucking amazing. And of course, all those chemicals aren't necessarily beneficial to us because we keep looking for them all the time, which is what new relationship energy is about. And it can bring really good things into our existing relationships. I hate the word old relationships. They're existing. They're not old. They're not tired. They're still here. They're still really important. And I don't like it when people use the word old relationships, existing relationships. I've written about limerence, as I said. It is not a pleasant thing to go through. It is quite obsessive and it can be quite dangerous. And people can end up stalking and do all sorts of stuff. However, under polyamory, it's slightly less dangerous. What they're talking about here is, oh no, I really want to get close to you and I'm quite obsessive about it. Well-matured relationships, yeah, that's kind of like a good brie or something. So limerence, do your research about that, please. Thank you, Namoria. That's a warning label about NRA to be good as well. So if you've got a metamor, that's if you have a partner, your metamor, so if you are this person and you are with this person in the middle, their partner is your metamor. Does that make sense? So the other one, the other one beyond my love that I have for this person. So if you are this person and you have a partner and that is their partner, these 2 are metamors. So different partners in a different way. N is a 4-person polycule where A and B are romantically involved, B and C are romantically involved, and C and D are romantically involved, but there are no triads within that. So you've got 2, 2, 2, 2 in an N. And some people call that a Z as well, or a Z. You can choose how you pronounce it. A nesting partner is where you have somebody living at home with you. That's all about in your nest. That makes a difference as well. Non-binary, people identify here as non-binary. Oh, in the circles I'm in, queer is used liberally, used in a celebrated and reclaimed way in Australia. Yeah, I feel the same way about pervert. The triad, we're coming to that as well in a minute. So I spoke a little bit about new relationship anyway. Non-binary is what is out there, the options that are out there, the binary of either or do not apply to me. So we might have used different terms as well, NB, different things, but that binary, that fixation doesn't fit with me. Non-hierarchical relationships in polyamory are where nobody holds power, nobody is different to anybody else. It's all about autonomy, equality, and nothing is prioritized. So if you're in a couple, for example, and you meet a new person, if this person is seeing that person, that relationship is just as important as this one. I mean, you can have hierarchical poly where it is just as important, but there's a difference. But you always have to make a choice. It's like having children. I always say this. So if you have one partner who's just broken their hand and needs to go to the hospital, but you have dinner booked with this partner Who has the greater need? And you have to think about these things in polyamory, because they are normal things that happen to all of us. And it's the same when you have a child, like their nappy needs changing, they need feeding. Well, they've done a shit, I'm going to change the nappy first and then I'll feed that one dinner, because that's less of the need. So if and that was a real situation with one of my clients of, I was supposed to go to the hospital, but I was also supposed to be having dinner. What do I do? How does that work? Who can manage? Like, I expect you to be there. Would that happen in monogamy and or polyamory? Yeah, it would happen in all of them, wouldn't it? It depends. Do they have other people? Yeah, so non-hierarchy. However, you are always going to be in a situation, even in non-hierarchy, where at some point you might have to make a choice. So it's really worth having conversations with your partners about what do these choices look like. Old relationship energy, fucking hate that word. I much prefer existing, as I've said, but it's often, like NRE is also, this is ORE or. That's established existing relationships. One penis policy. Often a cis man will have a one penis policy yet have multiple vaginal policies. So I'm not happy about that. And the term itself is pretty transphobic as well. It's difficult, and it really belittles relationships, and it keeps a woman in a certain position. However, for someone like me who's also a cuck queen, a one penis policy can really work depending on how it's used. And a cuck queen is somebody who likes their partner sleeping with other people, and either sees that compulsively or sees that from a jealousy perspective, to be humiliated and feel quite positive about that. I have a one vagina policy, not only just to take a stand, so absolutely, I get it. And an open polycule is where you've got a group of people and they're looking at new relationships. Other significant or significant other. So that's outside of that primary or nesting. Often, again, people will say, yes, they're very significant, it's someone else. But again, that's a little bit derisory to the other people. CC, I hate the one penis policy. However, for someone like me whose kink is cuck queening, one penis policy can work brilliantly. So it depends on the consent and how it's used. Whereas one penis policy, when it comes into polyamory, absolutely, I think you're signing up for something quite interesting. I would be curious as to why you're doing that, what's going on underneath, and what does that mean? Unless you really like the idea of humiliation and slavery and different things as well. So pansexual, sexual attraction to everybody, basically. Everybody. Parallel polyamory, what does that mean? So that's when your individual relationships are independent of the other individual relationships as well. So you're seeing that person there, it has nothing to do with that person over there. There may be some partnerships that are going on in a different way, friendships or closeness. That's what it is. I'm not going to go through the ones that are really, really basic. I'm going to go through the ones that really matter. A polycule, as I said, is a group of people. It's a group of people. Again, their configuration can really vary, whether it's a V, triad, closed, a quad, it doesn't matter what it is. But a polycule is a group of people. Polysexual, a lot of people say this, but, I'm really attracted. It doesn't necessarily mean gender. I use pansexual, but I don't know. How do you use it then, tits up? So, again, see, that's what I mean. Words really matter. How do you use it? What does it mean? Open to everybody. Some people say open to all genders, open to people regardless of gender. We have different definitions and descriptions, and some people get pansexual and demisexual really mixed up as well sometimes. Again, how do you use it? What matters? So polysexual is the idea of having a sexual attraction to multiple people, and people are now saying, well, that is my sexuality. That's an interesting one. Will it ever be used as a sexuality, as a definition? Don't know. That's really hard to say. So if someone's in a primary relationship, that again comes into hierarchical polyamory. That's where somebody is with somebody. And they say that this is the most important relationship. A quad is a four-person relationship where also you see it as a square, where all four are connected in some way. So the square has got all sorts of lines going through it as well. So it all goes this way. So it's a four-person relationship. Relationship anarchy. So I use pansexual, but don't use it in the way you described. I'm not attracted to all, but feels more inclusive to trans, non-binary than bisexual. Yes, and I really respect what you've just said. I think it's a continuum, it's a myriad, and I really respect that that's where you sit on it. Relationship anarchy, so that's like a non-hierarchical type of polyamory. It's anarchist, so it allows for everybody to say, I don't want my label, this is where I am, although it is a label, and I'm not involved in that. I'm not involved in in your group, in your quad, in your triad. And solo polyamory can be mixed up sometimes with relationship anarchy as well. Again, each person's definition can be really different to what I'm saying. When solo polyamory is, I am choosing to be my own partner, and polysexual, multisexual attraction to multiple, but not all genders. Yeah, I think that's what I just kind of said. I might be wrong, but I thought that's what I said. If I wasn't clear, I apologise. So solo polyamory is all about ourselves, right? I might see you, I might see me, but I'm very aware that the me matters here, slightly different. And I want to see multiple people, but not necessarily be in a relationship with them as such, the way it's defined. A secondary relationship or partner, that's a fucking hideous name, isn't it? Why would you call anyone secondary? I just don't think it's particularly pleasant, but some people do use it, and that's the additional, that's again used within hierarchy. Hello, you're my secondary relationship. Oh, thanks, that's what I've always aspired to be. Now, some people might like that. They might like that if they're a relationship anarchist, or they might like that. And people are now saying that the word poly is offensive. Yep. So the reason the word poly is offensive, because we look at Polynesians, and so people are saying we need to say polyam. I'm just in such a habit of saying poly, so I apologise if it is offensive to anybody. Polyam or polyamorous. Mine is a habit of years and years and years of poly. So I apologise if I hurt anybody. Telomore. So we talked about metamors, here. So if your metamor is here and they have a partner, that is your telomore. So your telomore is the partner of a metamor who is not your shared partner. Can I have some clarification on the term relationship anarchist, please? Do you know what? Honestly, look it up. So it's really going to help you if you have a look and then you work out what it means to you. Basically what it means, there is a polyandry, but it's rarely mentioned. I'm going as quick as I can, and it's already 9:05, I promise. And please feel free to go if you need to disappear. Relationship anarchy is that it's a non-hierarchical polyamory, but it's all about, I'm going to self-determine how I am. I don't have to state where I am in an intimate relationship. And it's got anarchist principles around that. So it says, this is where I am. Petamore is the pet of your partner. That's just a very bad joke. So where was I? Thruple. So a thruple is like a triad, so where you've got three people, and the three people can really vary. So we'll go on to that as well in a minute. Triad. So a triad is a relationship where you've got all three people who are romantically involved, and you could argue that they are a thruple. How dare you have a life when you want to stay here with us? I know, I'm really sorry, I'm holding you. Please feel free to go if you want to, but I just finished this list, and then I'll talk about what I'm doing next week. A unicorn is often a bisexual woman. Some people argue that a man is a dragon nowadays, and we've got all sorts of other names like vixens and bulls and different things, but they don't always come into the polyamory version of things. They do sometimes. So a knight, yeah. So unicorn hunters and unicorns. This is often a bisexual or pansexual woman, 9 times out of 10. And they want this person to come into their couple's relationship under their terms and conditions. So you need to fit in with us. You need to fit in with the way we see things. And a unicorn hunter is literally the couple that are looking for that. We want to see you once a week. You can have a sexual relationship with us, but you maybe can't have a romantic, or we do want romantic. I like the dragon here more. And it's classified as a male version of that. So a V relationship is when you have three people and the two ends are metamors, but they're not romantically involved. So the hinge, which is what we just talked about, is a person. Have a Google of relationship anarchy smorgasbord. And that's a great link if anyone can find it. It's this huge piece. A veto is for an interesting thing. So somebody might be given a veto. It's a bit like being given a hall pass, really, but a veto is the opposite, to say, you can stop this happening. This is where we're going to say that this isn't okay. I want you to stop seeing that person. I want you to do that. So I had a situation where I had a client who was out with his girlfriend, had a girlfriend at home as well, and the girlfriend from home called and said, that's it, you need to come home because you've been out for too long. She said veto. Ooh, that's interesting. How you use it and what you do. There's a lot of power and control there, isn't there? And some people will say that a wibble is a form of somebody feeling a little bit nervous as to what's going on and what that means and how people feel about it, if that makes sense. Polyandry is where the woman takes 2 or more husbands. It's just done a different way. And so that's more about the woman having two, rather than polyamory is about everybody having everybody. But people don't often talk about that as much as, who was it who just said that? Somebody just said it's not spoken about. Elle said that as well. So that's when you've got a woman who has more than one husband. So she has a couple of partners. So her V potentially would be with her as the hinge, with two men as the opposites. Oh my God, I've gone on for so long tonight. So thank you very much. If you are a therapist and you want a, I need to write that. If you want a CPD certificate, this is my email address. Don't send me shit. I'm not interested in hearing anything from anyone. This is just if you want a CPD certificate, because there are quite a few therapists and counsellors who come in. So thank you very much. I hope everyone's enjoyed it in some way, shape or form. I hope you've learned something. I've certainly learned a few things today as well. Next week, we're looking at ADHD in the intersection with kink. We're looking at triggers, what they mean, what that word means, and what's going to happen. And then we're also going to spend the third part looking at the attraction of intense marking. So intense play, so black eyes, severe bruises, and different things as well. So that's what we're looking at. And then the week after, the first one I've got is disability and kink. Right, so people are saying really nice things. Thank you very much. This was amazing. Thank you very much, darling. Thank you as always. The Relationship Anarchy Smorgasbord is great. It is. Thank you very much. Yes, you're very welcome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great, thank you, thank you. What does the CPG certificate say? I wonder if it's useful on your CV. It says that, oh, hang on, I can even bring it up because I've got it pre-written. So it basically says that so-and-so, and I have to have your real name, I'm really sorry, attended a healthy mental practices Zoom workshop which covered varied aspects of the psychology, mental health, relationships, communication, and more in polyamorous and power exchange kink-based relationships. That's what it says. So it's terribly proper. It's not anything that will get anyone into trouble. So thank you very much for all the lovely things you're saying. So please welcome back next week. Please spread the word if you want other people to come. Not literally, because we don't like that. So as I say, ADHD intersection with kink, which is interesting, and then generalised and all other disabilities, whether you see ADHD as a disability or not. The week after, because that's been requested. Someone said, why have you just done ADHD? Because I've done disabilities before, and this is a specific question. So sometimes I do repeat. And triggers, all about triggers. What do triggers mean? What do triggers do? How can we work with triggers? What answers are there? And we're doing intensity. So black eyes, split lips, bruises, bleeding. What's the attraction? Why do some people want that in terms of BDSM? If you want, these workshops are completely free of charge. I have a KOFI coffee page, and I have Patreon as well if you want to do any of those, and you fucking really don't have to either. It doesn't matter. Ginger, first time attending after I saw Ivory and Gannett recommending, was really good. Oh, thank you very much. Awesome again. Catch you Sunday for the live experience. Whoa, hey, thank you. Thanks. Love you all. Really nice to see you all, and I will see you all very soon. Wanker wave. Wanker wave. See you later. Bye. Then with your riders about what not to do whilst in this workshop, I'm curious, has someone acted inappropriately? Yes, Jane, I've had at least 2 actual masturbators. Yep. Yes, I have. So see you later. Bye.